just shaking. I had some tears in my eyes. It was really emotional for me.
But just a mere 2 days later, Tony found his fairy tale was to be short-lived.
0.2 kilometers to go. Oh, the crash! Martin! Nibali is the first faller. The yellow jersey is the other faller. Oh, dear me, that does not look good news.
Tour de France is so important and so big, so I don't want it to stop.
By finishing the stage, Martin retained yellow, but a broken collarbone forced him to abandon the race.
I can handle pain more or less well, so unless the doctor says you really have to go to hospital, normally I always try to fight back.
Martin has been a world time trial champion 4 times. And with the opportunity to take yellow after today's stage, the German is extra motivated.
Tour de France started this year in Germany, so my home country. I'm a time trialist. I had a big chance to go for yellow, but on the other hand, put the pressure really high.
Today set up very well for the 6-time German national time trial champion, 4-time time trial world champion. As you can see, also has some stage win success here at the Tour. Christian, thousands of Germans lining the streets, wanting to see that success in the 14-kilometer time trial. Do you think he's going to let him down?
No, I don't think I'm going to let him down. I mean, I would have said maybe let him down if Rowan Dennis was going to be here. Like we were talking about before, the BMC riders chose not to come to the Tour. But everything's on his shoulders here today. He's one of the best time trialists, along with Fabian Cancellara, that kind of reinvented the game and brought it up to another level. Bradley Wiggins, another one like that. I ran into him training the first day I got here on Wednesday, all by himself, in the rain, in the traffic. I mean, it's not the nicest road to go out for like Sunday cruise on, that's for sure. You know, and his trainer out there taking wind speeds. I mean, they're taking every box they possibly can control to make sure he goes as fast as possible. Can something happen? Of course. You know, flat tires, crashes, maybe some unknown wind, but I think he's a hands-on favorite to win here today.
Also, he's had the advantage that he can focus his training in the weeks leading up to the time trial. 14K is very specific distance. They don't have a GC contender on Katusha. He has no other jobs for the first day of the race except win the time trial. And when Tony Martin, he knows probably better than anybody in this field how to get the body ready for the time trial, the discipline, the shortness of the event, and the intensity that's needed, not just on the day, but in the weeks leading up to it. And I see him as the most capable of doing that, the most willing, and I'm pretty sure he's been doing it.
Yeah, and let's face it, he's been licking his chops since they announced the course back last fall. I mean, they say Düsseldorf, he's like, oh, yes. Yeah. Please. I mean, really, but this could define his career.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
even though you see what he's already had, four-time world champion, 4-time already stage winner, yellow jersey holder, but winning here and then winning the yellow jersey to boot, right. It's big day for him.
So if he does win yellow today, as you both expect him to do, how long do you think he can keep it?
I think to stage 5 in Planche de Belfi. And Planche de Belfi is really hard. Longwy, I think, could be fine in stage 3. The other days are sprint days. I mean, they're going to be dangerous. Of course, anything could happen yet again. But if everything goes well, he doesn't do anything silly like he did a couple of years ago when he lost his jersey. And that's not silly even. It's just hectic. You know, that's stress. That's trying to defend that yellow jersey, make sure that nothing happens. That's bike racing. But, yeah, if everything goes good, stage 5. Planche de Belfi.
Yeah, absolutely. Stage 5 is totally realistic. And the time trial being as long as it is, the time bonuses that the sprinters will be able to get, he won't have to worry about that much. He'll have enough of a cushion against the sprinters, so he doesn't have to be too nervous of defending it for the first 3 or 4 days, and should be in the yellow jersey still if he wins.
Yeah, exactly.
That's probably the biggest if.
There's a lot of ifs, but there's a one outlier there, and that's Marcel Kittel. I mean, if Marcel Kittel, who can time trial very well, probably the best sprinter who could time trial, he could be the one guy who could take away with time bonuses.
All right, the riders not only dealing with the 14 kilometers of the time trial, dealing with some weather, as we've been showing you throughout the day here in Düsseldorf. It's dry right now, but it's been raining. The streets are wet. There's a very good chance for rain again, Bob. What kind of effect is this going to have on the riders today?
It's not a very technical course, and I don't think the weather, as long as it's consistent, and that's the main thing, throughout the start order. They start at 3:30, or 3:15, the first rider off. Then the last rider off is Chris Froome at 6 32, I believe. So that's a lot of hours,
Right.
and the weather can change a lot. So your rotation is going to be important. And the forecast was it's raining at the start and getting better throughout the day. But I think it's going to be the opposite.
And let's not forget about the wind. The wind could actually play a bigger part than the rain.
Right. The favorites, Chris Froome, Richie Porte, not expected to win this time trial, of course, but what's their game plan? What's a good day for them?
I was looking at the stats just the other day. Rowan Dennis, the same distance, took 50 seconds out of Chris Froome 2 years ago. So being within a minute already, we were talking about Nairo Quintana off camera. If he does within a minute, he ripped the cover off the ball.
Yeah.
I mean, that's amazing ride for Nairo Quintana, little guy. Richie Porte, though, he's a great time trials. Chris Froome, great times. These guys are been Olympic medalists before in this discipline, at least with Chris Froome. So I think Richie, he could be within 30 seconds or 20 seconds of the winner. I think this would be another day, though, that Richie needs to take some time out of Chris Froome.
Yeah, it's a very big day for Richie Porte especially, and I bet he's going to be ready for it. I bet he does a great time trial. If he's in the top 3 and only loses a few seconds to the winner, it's going to give him a big advantage over his competitors. Guys like Nairo, guys like Romain Bardet, they could be in for some serious time loss on day 1 after only 14 kilometers. So it's a very challenging day for the GC riders.
And a lot of people don't put too much weight into the prologue just because it's a short time. Maybe the time gets out that big, but the riders put a lot of weight into it. They really judge their form off of how good they do here today. So psychologically, going forward from today, and the team, like, oh, Romain Bardet lost a minute, I'm not supporting him anymore. No, that's like, well, at least he.
No, we learned that.
We already learned.
That was very clear.
There's no support here.
We picked out a few of the favorites. I don't think Romain's going to show up on this either. For stage 1, the time trial today, Tony Martin, the German, seen as the guy. My eyes go to Taylor Phinney. Long road to making it to his first Tour de France. And I know you have some experience with that family. You rode with his dad here at the Tour.
Yes, we did. We were teammates, and it's 30 years since Davis won a stage here, exactly. I remember Taylor being born just before the 1990 Tour de France, so Davis could come over. And I would love to see Taylor fulfill his promise as an athlete. It's been a long, hard road back from a devastating, career-ending injury. And he's fought so hard to get to where he is. Whether or not he'll be competitive, I'm not sure. But when he gets back to his best, he'll be competitive against these riders for any time trial, especially one like today. So I'd like to see him do a solid ride, maybe not as spectacular as he's capable of, but another step in the right direction, and that would be awesome.
I mean, I don't want to, as cliche as this is, he's already won just being here on the start line here in Düsseldorf, as is Cue the Rain.
Right,
First ride is about to go. But yeah, I mean, just getting here and the long road that he's had. And if you ever see the scars in person, then you have a much better understanding of where he's come from. And not just there, but even this year, the concussion that he had in Tour of Flanders, and then crashing the last day of Tour of California, right when he's starting to get back on his feet yet again, and then just finishing the Tour of Swiss, which was an accomplishment in itself, and then making this team here. 30 years, like you said, to his father's win. It's a great story.
All right, 30 years since then. I tell you, I'll give you another number of years. How about 110 years since the first time the Tour de France went outside of the borders of France? It came right here to Germany. And now today, for the first time ever, we are in Düsseldorf for the Tour de France, the Grand Depart. 14 kilometers of an individual time trial coming up. After the break, we hand off to Phil and Paul, and they guide you through the race. Stage 1 of the Tour de France coming right up.
Good morning, America. For only the 22nd time in the 104-year history of the Tour de France, it starts on foreign soil. After a gap of 30 years, we return to Germany, and this is Düsseldorf. Below TV Tower is the beautiful River Rhine. The weather, though, is not on our side. The rain has started again, as we can see now with the Weather Channel map. 59 degrees. It's cool here. It's supposed to be summer. They're saying scattered showers, but at the moment it is getting rather grim indeed. 198 riders, very nervous riders. 49 of them have never ridden the Tour de France before, and they're going to have to start it in the wet, I think.
Yes, and when you bear in mind, Phil, this 3-week bike race we're lining up for, they've all got to start on their own today because it's the individual time trial. It really is a test of truth.
Well, the first man is in the gate. There he is, Elie Gesbert. His first Tour de France, his first year as a professional, and he's pulled the first number out of the bag. How is he feeling? At least, Paul, he comes from Brittany, the home of Bernard Hinault, the last man to win the Tour de France for France.
I suppose we better throw in a happy birthday as well, because he's just 22 years of age this morning, and it's a real honour for this Frenchman from Brittany, as you said, Phil, from Saint-Brieuc, to open up the opening stage of the Tour de France here in Germany.
Well, it looks a solemn affair out there at the moment. He's just been told he's got about 30 seconds to go. It's a big crowd here, despite the weather, and we're going to see plenty of it as we look around this 14-kilometre out and home, basically out and home course up and down the banks of the River Rhine. Huge moment here for the first man to go. Elie Gesbert, the youngest rider in the race. A gentle rollout. He's the first of 198 riders. His best hope is to be first back to the finishing line. Each of the riders now going with timed gaps of 1 minute. Oh, a huge moment for such a young man to take part now. The 2013 junior time trial champion of his country.
Well, the same year he was also the national road racing champion. Theoretically, Phil, when we think about this course, it's not really a very technical course. For this young man, as he rolls away there, a little bit tricky going down the starting ramp. And you can be certain that a lot of the professional riders who will start later on in the afternoon will be watching these same images to see if they can pick up any tips on how they go out over the first kilometre of the race.
Oh, with such a big spread of starters over the time of this stage. We're beginning now here 3:15 at local time. The last man will go at 6:30 local time. There can be big differences in the weather and big decisions made by the teams to try and hope they've chosen the best part of the day. Well, let's have a look at the Geico stage map and see where the course takes us, Paul.
Well, it's pretty much all based along the River Rhine. There you can see just up towards the top there we are, just over the border, not too far away from Holland or from Belgium at all. And there it starts right in Düsseldorf. Very quickly it gets onto the banks of the River Rhine. And this is really, I would say, Phil, a powerhouse course until you get to the bottom end of the course. And then it gets just a little bit tricky, especially with the weather conditions around one or two of those corners. Now, you want to be very careful going around this point before you start to head back up towards the River Rhine. And I think this is a course that has been tailor-made for a powerhouse like Tony Martin. He hails from Germany, he knows what he has to do, and he will want to negotiate that bottom part of the course as safely as possible to use his power on the run back up towards the finishing line along the banks of the River Rhine.
Well, the only benefit of the course is there's no real hills on the course, and people think it might suit riders like Tony Martin. He will be going near the end of the lineup and flying, he hopes, the flag for Germany today. There's the beautiful Rhine. When they built Düsseldorf, or started to build it back in the 12th century, they built a settlement where they could keep an eye on the River Rhine and see who was coming down it. Since then, it's developed into this marvellous city of 630,000 people. Back into the start house. Nate Brown getting his first crack at the Tour de France. 10 seconds.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top.
It is so daunting, Paul, to go down that mat at the start when it's raining.
Well, it certainly is, and most of these riders, although we're looking at them right now, they prepared themselves for this over the whole of the morning to get themselves ready to go out at full speed from that starting ramp.
Back up briefly with the leader here now, Elie Gesbert, the youngest rider in the race, 22 years of age today. He's from Brittany, which is a hotbed of cycling. As we look out through the Merck now, we've just got 4 riders underway of 198 in the 104th Tour de France. As we look out across TV Tower, we'll take a break. The Tour de France on NBCSN is brought to you by Giant Bicycles, the world leader in cycling technology and craftsmanship. By Lululemon, official wardrobe provider of the Tour de France on NBC. Live a life you love. And by Pickle Juice Sport, formulated and proven to stop muscle cramps. Learn more at picklepower.com. Welcome back. The opening minutes of the Tour de France here. This is the 7th rider out of the start house of 198. It's the individual time trial. This is Nasser Bouhanni. Well, at least Paulie's on the start line. Last year, he'd got involved in an unscheduled boxing match and couldn't make the start.
Yeah, we never really got to the bottom of what happened there, but his hand was injured. He's one of the best sprinters to come out of France, and I think he'd be a lot happier this year to be out on the starting block. We're looking here at the first man to start, the man who is really opening up the roads here at the Tour de France today, Elie Gesbert. As a junior, he was 2-time national champion, but I have noticed that he's been taking it very precariously, going around 1 or 2 of these technical corners. But the majority of this course, Phil, I have to say, even though we are in rather damp racing conditions, it is a powerhouse course. A man needs a lot of power on a route like this, as we look here at Laurens ten Dam.
Catching up now with Laurens ten Dam, the Dutchman who's riding his 15th Grand Tour today. So well experienced as he gets out on course. He's been going for just over a minute. These early starters are not really expected to rock the boat. We expect by the end of this day a winning time somewhere around about 16 minutes for the 14 kilometres, which is 8.7 kilometres time trial. Well, outside of where we're sat and probably getting very wet is Steve Schlanger. Steve.
Well, Phil, maybe just a little wet. It's been raining here for about the last 15 minutes at the finish, but just light rain, no wind. And let's talk a little about the tactics for Team Sky and how they're going to set this thing up for Chris Froome later on. Some of the early riders that are going to go out for Team Sky, what they're going to be doing is, as they go into a corner, the team director will say something like, hey, 90-degree corner, 80%. Once the rider goes through, he'll put his hand behind his back and either give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, meaning that you can either take the corner faster than 80% or you have to dial it back a little. The team director will take information like that in, take it back to Chris Froome and add that to his already extensive preparation to give him that little extra insight as he gets set for his ride later in the day.
Well, we're looking through the mist at the moment across the bridges here, which crisscross over the River Rhine. This is a river which is split into 3, upper, middle and lower, and eventually rushes out into the North Sea.
Well, the first rider from Team Sky that Steve was purporting to there would be Luke Rowe, and he'll be the first rider to be going out from Team Sky to give those indications. But don't think all of the other teams, like BMC Racing, for example, the team of Richie Porte, won't be doing the same sort of thing, gathering information from the riders who go out early on in the afternoon. But I think, as Bob and both Christian alluded to, that the big problem about an individual time trial at the Tour de France is there's 3 hours separating the first rider to start from the last riders to start, and there can be massive change in the weather conditions, whether it's the route being less damp later on in the afternoon or a change in the strength of the wind.
This is Nasser Bouhanni there, as we caught a brief glimpse for the moment of Laurens ten Dam, who's riding just behind Bouhanni by 1 minute in the start house. And you can see now, well, I tell you, we rode here this morning, and it must have been about a 2-year work to work out how to shut down the centre of Düsseldorf to run this event. An amazing feat by the authorities to close this race. And let's not forget that this race should have been starting in London, and on the eve of signing the contracts, the London authority says, no, we don't want it. And Düsseldorf were in like a flash. There's the River Rhine. We're now about 10 riders underway. Get more tour than ever before with NBC Sports Gold. 30 extra hours of extended coverage, live GPS tracking and more. Learn more at NBCSportsGold.com. We now have some 14 riders taken to the start of the 198 as we open the 3-week-long Tour de France. There's TV Tower. We're coming down, and I think we're picking up Nacer Bouhanni here, the Frenchman, who is a sprinter and will be looking tomorrow to race into Belgium in first place.
Well, there's an awful lot of sprinters in the Tour de France this year that he will have to come up against. In fact, his compatriot Arnaud Demar won the national championships just a week ago for France in the sprint ahead of the man we're looking at. So it may well be a little chance for revenge for Nacer Bouhanni, who is himself a very fast sprinter. But there'll be a lot of motivated sprinters like Andre Greipel and, of course, Peter Sagan, who will try to win the green jersey for the most consistent rider on every individual stage for the 6th year in a row.
Now, this is the opening 14-kilometre individual time trial, the race for the first yellow jersey of the Tour de France. The man who's fastest at the first checkpoint thus far is Sonny Colbrelli, an Italian in his first Tour de France. He's gone through in 9 minutes and 39 seconds, followed by the USA's Nate Brown at 18 seconds slower. As we pick up here, Mark Renshaw, the lead-out man for Mark Cavendish when we get down to those sprinting stages. Now we're waiting for the arrival now of Elie Gesbert, and here he is. He's in the straight as he now heads up towards the finishing line. He's gone through in the 3rd spot at the moment at 8K.
Yeah, but I'm just looking at the race route here, Phil, and that's what a lot of the other professional riders who will start later on in the afternoon will be looking at. You can see into the finishing line, there's a lot of dry spots over to the left-hand side, and it is so difficult to judge how it's going to be when you go out in a couple of hours' time. But for this man, I mean, I think he'll be really riding on the crest of a wave in front of a crowd like this.
1 kilometre to go for the young Frenchman. He's got a first on everything on this opening day of the Tour de France. His first tour, it's his 22nd birthday, it's his first year as a professional, and he's out to do his first ride today in the prologue time trial. He races up to the line now. He's far outside the 50 km/h average that we expect, a 54 km/h average by the winner today. So he's just going to finish and think of how he's going to face up to 3 weeks in the Tour de France starting tomorrow when we say farewell to Germany and go to Belgium. Elie Gesbert now knows what it's like to be a professional in the Tour de France and race in front of these huge crowds. There's no race like it in the world. Nothing rivals the great Tour de France. And starting for only the first time after a 30-year gap on German soil. Last one was in West Berlin before the wall fell between West and East Berlin. 17 minutes out in the saddle. We expect around 16 minutes for the winner, but this is good, this is fine. He wasn't expected to win today. He has survived to be first man off and first man home, so he set the marker for us. Yeah, well, he did what Paul Sherwin once did, and that's ride a time trial, be first to finish, and for a moment lead the stage.
Yeah, but on this occasion, this man is in fact the first leader of the Tour de France.
Yes,
let's
indeed.
not forget, and that is a great honour to have on your 22nd birthday. And I would expect as we go, well, a little bit further back, it looks to me as if Laurens Dendam out on the course, Phil, has just caught and passed his minute man who started ahead of him, Nacer Bouhanni.
Well, that's a little look back to the moment that Tendam, who had a high finish in the Tour de France in 2014, finished 9th overall, has gone past the sprinter Bouhanni. So he's lost a minute already in this year's Tour de France to that man in front of him. And this is still Colbrelli coming in now. He was the best time at the check at 8 kilometres. So we'll see what he can do. He was 3rd man to start. It looks like he might be 2nd on the road now.
Well, one of the reasons we were talking about the opening days of the Tour de France and the sprinters, well, this is a name to retain, Simon Colbrelli, because we also think that he might be trying to do a good time in the individual time trial here, Phil, to see whether or not he may be able to grab the overall leader's jersey with the time bonuses later on. 16
minutes and 36 seconds, Paul, is a pretty good time to get inside that 17-second margin. And that's put him 1 minute and 11 seconds. Minard is in, 1 minute 11 seconds. Now Colbrelli has come in with that time confirmed, 16:36, putting Gesbert 48 seconds back of him, and Minard 1 minute and 11. That's a good ride by Colbrelli.
It is this man here, though, might give us a little bit more of a reference, because Andrei Grivko has been 5 times national time trial champion of the Ukraine. He's a very good individual time trialist, and so that may well give us an indication of what sort of times we can expect a little later on in the day. But the men who want to win this individual, the Tour de France overall, guys like Chris Froome and Richie Porte, they have to come out and perform on a day like this, because over a 14-kilometer time trial, you could very easily find yourself losing 30, 40 or 50 seconds, and you don't want to do that psychologically on day one.
Well, the rain is just light drizzle at the moment and low cloud, so it's quite acceptable. Let's watch the arrival now of the American Nathan Brown. He's still sitting in 4th place at the first checkpoint. See if he's consolidated. He's only just going outside 17 minutes, this young man from the Cannondale Drapac team. It's the American squad as well. And he's gone in at, I missed the time actually, at average 34 seconds behind Colbrelli.
But Lawrence Tendam here in the black and white jersey of Sunweb, he's given us an indication of a rider who's quite prepared to take a few risks going around the damp corners. Nate Brown actually slips into 2nd position.
So Blue Crow about to get underway. That'll put 22 riders on the course or finished in this opening day of the Tour de France in Germany. Looking at the arrival of Nasser Bouhanni here, the French sprinter, who is heading up towards the finish with this opening time trial, the opening day of the Tour de France here in Düsseldorf. It's 14 kilometres. There's no change in the leaderboard. Sonny Colbrelli, the Italian, is in with 16 minutes and 36. And the American Nathan Brown has just dropped. In fact, Lawrence Tendam off camera has just crossed the line, and he's got the lead by 30 seconds over Colbrelli. So as the riders come in thick and fast now, this is Tim Wellens arriving up towards the line. Wellens gone through with the 2nd best time at the checkpoint and faster than Tendam, as he held it all the way to the line to get over the top of both of them. As he hits the line with 18:27, the clock said, but I can't believe that's quite right. Well, while we catch up with these are the early starts, let's take you into our stage predictions with you now for the next 3 weeks. It's 1 pick per day for the commentators. No rider can be picked twice on the same stage. Order of picks alternate every day. Stage winners 5 down to 1 point for 5th place. So here we are, folks. Day 1. Chance for us all to make a mark. I'm not so sure. Paul has gone for Tony Martin. Why? He was the first to pick. I've gone for a man we can tell you lovely stories on when we see him ride later, Primož Roglič. Christian has gone for Stefan Kung, the Swiss rider. Bob has gone for Richie Porte. Oh, what on earth does Bob know? And Jens has gone for Josh van Emden, who won the time trial stage of the Giro. We'll see how they go as we continue to get down to the creme de la creme of the start list as the time trial here in Düsseldorf continues. There's the leaderboard at the moment. Colbrelli is still at the top. So we're looking now at the riders who are not in the Tour de France in Düsseldorf, not selected by his BMC team, TJ Van Garderen. Crashed in the Tour of Italy at Rowan Dennis, who holds the record for the opening time trial in this event. Tom Dumoulin won the Giro, and he's not come here. Julien Alaphilippe has an injured knee. Adam Yates is raced the Giro. His brother Simon is here, and not selected Brian Cocker, and Vincenzi Nibali also raced the Giro d'Italia, not choosing to ride in the Tour de France. Some big names there missing out, but I think we have a superb team here. This is the arrival of Mark Renshaw, Paul.
Well, a rider who also is coming back from a very nasty crash in the early part of the year. He injured his ankle. In fact, he broke his ankle in a nasty crash in the Schelde Prize, one of the early season one-day classics in Belgium. And he's got himself back into form, just approaching the Tour de France. And he's hoping that he can be an ally and a lead-out man for Mark Cavendish, who we talked about a little earlier on, who is recovering or trying to recover from Epstein-Barr or glandular fever, to give it its common name.
17 minutes 54 for Mark Renshaw. He won't be worried about that. There on screen is Thomas de Gent, and there he is in reality, starting.
man who won the Mont Ventoux stage of the Tour de France last year, and he was a rider who can produce a very good individual time trial.
The next rider of interest to see at the finishing line will be Andrei Grivko, the Ukrainian rider, because he set a very quick time at 8 kilometers. At the moment at the finish, two riders equal on time. Tim Wellens of Belgium with 16 minutes and 36, and Sonny Colbrelli of Italy, given the same time. If it were to stay that way, of course, they would count back as far as a thousandth of a second to find the winner. This is Grivko.
Well, he looks pretty fast. He's nice and aerodynamic right in the middle of his handlebars. Got his hands are very close together. As you can see, the weather conditions certainly aren't the best weather conditions for a solo effort around this course of 14 kilometers or 8.7 miles of racing. But Grivko was 12 seconds faster than Sonny Colbrelli at the the first time check on the course.
Well, just look at the conditions here at about 1,200 feet above the River Rhine there, because we're on the flight path into Düsseldorf International Airport, and our helicopters hopefully will be able to stay up there despite those conditions. There's Andrei Grivko, a very, very good time trialist. Now, has he kept this pace? Because what we've been seeing is riders setting the best times at 8 kilometers have been losing a little bit on the way back in. He's looking at a time of better than 16 minutes and 36 seconds just at this moment.
Well, he's a rider with a little bit of controversy around him, Phil, because earlier on in the year he was actually disqualified for 45 days, having a little bit of a, shall I say, contre-temps to be polite, or shall I just say that he had a punching
That's right,
round with Marcel Kittel in the Dubai Tour.
He did apologise, of course. Still showing best time on the board right now, and he's running up towards the finish, so I think he's going to hold it to the line here and put himself in the hot seat at least, or will probably be the wet seat just now.
It's a pretty impressive time, Phil, because he's trying to challenge the time of 16 minutes and 36, and that is a massive new best time, 15:45, if the clock is correct.
Well, his time check, I think it is correct. Of course it is, because a 9:27 at the 8 kilometer mark. Grivko has kept increasing on that. He's actually gone faster as he's been on the way back up to the finishing line here. Conditions, though, I'm afraid, do seem to be deteriorating. But his time of Grivko appears, though, to be rounded down to 16 minutes and 21 seconds. But it's still best time so far. The Verizon IndyCar Series is on NBCSN. It's all-American short track action in the cornfields of Iowa with Iowa Corn 300. Next Sunday at 5:30 Eastern on NBCSN. It's pretty wet and dreary outside. Let's go inside the studio and catch up with Bob Christian and Paul Burmeister.
Phil, thank you very much. It is wet inside, but I'm looking at that screen, and all I see are the raindrops on the camera lens. We just had a crash that happened on the Stage 1 time trial. I'm sure those wet streets are not helping.
Lotto Jumbo rider. I think that's Dylan Groenewegen, their sprinter. Ooh. So he hits the paint on the road, and absolutely no way to stop before getting hit right into the fences.
Telltale when you see them slide and not even rip their skin suit, and they almost look like he's accelerating when he's on the asphalt. Not a way to start the tour there for their sprinter.
Take another look at the fall that just happened.
Right on that manhole cover, it looks like.
Then he hit something else. He just does not slow down whatsoever. Slip and slide downtown Düsseldorf.
Well, he did get back on the bike and right away. And so that's kind of the cue for what I was going to ask anyway, Bob and Christian. I was going to say, what kind of effect is the rain going to have? We see it's having an effect already, but how difficult is this for the riders to deal with?
Well, you have to slow way down when it's raining, especially the initial raindrops, right when the first rider started, cue the rain. So for the first hour or so, it's going to be very, very slick. The chances that the rider starting later in the rotation, the odds at being drier are much greater, and a big advantage for the rider starting later on in the day when we theoretically assume it's going to start drying up. It won't get worse, that's for sure.
Right. All right. Well, Christian had a chance to ride this when it was dry out, I believe, yes?
It was dry.
It was dry. Okay. That was the good time to ride it, and that's our cue. Time now for the Peloton stage preview with Christian Vande Velde. Let's take a look.
one Tour de France started in Düsseldorf, Germany. 14-kilometer individual time trial right here, right down the Rhine. The riders will be starting right here behind me, coming on the left-hand side of the road, approaching big speeds right out of the gate. Coming up onto this bridge, a little over 4.5 kilometers into the race. By this time, you'd hope to have found a nice rhythm, especially on that opening straight. A lot of power, especially if it's a headwind. And then obviously on this bridge, you're completely open to the elements. Opa! After this last bend right behind me, the riders will more or less see the finish line right ahead of them. Easy reaching speeds around 38, 40 miles per hour on this home stretch. Should be interesting. Yellow jersey on the line. First stage, Tour de France in Düsseldorf.
All right, Christian, aside from the rain that's falling, as you can see, and the wet roads, what did you learn by riding this course that could help the riders?
Well, without the rain, I would say it's not that technical at all. I mean, there's only 11 corners out of the 14 kilometers, so that's less than a 1-to-1 ratio. But as we just saw there, with very handy bike handler to boot, taking a little bit of risk. There is one urban section right there that actually Bob and I did not ride yesterday. Again, I had ridden it 4 or 5 times since I've been here. But it's all about this stretch right here that this Cannondale rider's riding down. It's almost 10 kilometers, almost 6 miles up and down this section where it's just all power, completely flat out. And then you see right here, this is where actually where the crash happened. Or very close to, yeah, I think it might have been a crash. But this is the urban section. There's a few corners in here. The other corners are just really just sweepers, on and off bridges, a little bit. They always call it an overpass, just up and over there, and that's it. But yeah, it's all about power today. This is why we're picking Tony Martin.
We'll get you back here to stage 1 as the time trial will continue. We've already seen one crash. Wet roads, watch out. The rain continues to fall. Stage 1 also will continue when we come back.
Brought to you by Illumination and Universal's new film, Despicable Me 3. This summer, Gru and the Minions are going back to villainy. Despicable Me 3, now playing. Well, it hasn't chased away the weather, I'm afraid. The cloud is still very low here as we cut towards the action and seeing the arrival of the man we just saw fall, Dylan Groenewegen, the Dutch sprinter who would be rather hoping to be mixing it with the winners tomorrow. But he might be a little bit sore from that nasty left-hand bend crash. But it doesn't seem to have altered his pace. He's not really up amongst the leaderboard either.
Well, it's certainly not the way you want to start a Tour de France, going down hard like that, because whether you like it or not, anytime you go down on a bicycle, and in fact, if you just look at his handlebars there, they're just a little bit twisted as well, the handlebars in the middle that he's trying to hang on to. You do not want to start the Tour de France with a crash like that, especially if you're one of the top sprinters.
As he comes up to line well off the pace here, there's no change in the overall. Andrei Grivko, who has been the time trial champion of Ukraine 5 times, holds on to the leaderboard by 15 seconds just now. The man behind, Nicolas Ede, is also in our sights.
Yes, he's a last-minute selection to the Tour de France. You can see the rider in the red jersey there of Cofidis. In fact, he was only selected on Sunday night last week, as we see just finishing there. Groenewegen, the black and yellow jersey, and Nicolas Ede coming up to the line as well.
I'll tell you what, Paul, we've just caught sight in the distance of Nikias Arndt, and here he is now. Now, he was only 4 seconds off the time of Grivko at the check at 8 kilometers. He could have turned this around. He's looking to stop the clock now, better than 16 minutes and 21 seconds. And he says 16:20.95. That could be the best time.
That is, I think, a very impressive ride, Phil, for a guy who in the past really had a title as a sprinter, and it's coming through as being confirmed by a second faster than Andrei Grivko. Now, that gives me an indication that a little later on, a name we haven't mentioned too much, Michael Matthews, one of the big sprinters, who has become a very big friend of Nikias Arndt, and they both trained at altitude leading up to the Tour of Switzerland. Well, I think that Michael Matthews later on in the day could be a name to conjure up for a top finish in the time trial this afternoon.
Well, that's not a bad debut in the Tour de France for Nikias Arndt, as he's got 16 minutes 20. Well, it's time to introduce you to our man out on the course now. We're going to be hearing from him for 3 weeks in the thick of the action. Let's go out inside the race with Steve Perino.
Well, Phil, I'm just here at the start. I've taken a lap, stuck my head inside the Lotto Jumbo car, asked them how their man is doing after the crash, and he looked at me and he said, he crashed? So apparently the news did not get to them, and that just underscores as much technology and detail that they all get into. Sometimes the directors don't hear everything, but I can tell you, having taken a lap around this course, it is not raining right now, but it is not fully dried out. The director of BMC I spoke with, they've all gone to rain tires, and there is no doubt the recon that they did earlier when it was drier is not the pace they can take into the corners unless things begin to dry out any more than they have so far.
No, it's a serious problem, Steve. Those guys are just going to have to subscribe to NBC Gold and keep up to date with the action. Thomas de Gent is coming up now. He's had his big days throughout his career as a stage race rider, heading up towards the end of this time trial, and he's not on the leaderboard at the halfway check.
But I think what Steve mentioned there is it's really important in the next couple of hours of this time trials. We see the finish there of Thomas de Gent. He stops the clock there, 17 minutes and 21. He's lost himself close to a minute at this point in the race, but he's not too concerned about any of that. But all of the other team managers, Phil, they will be at a hotel somewhere. They'll be watching a television to look at the changing conditions, to try and make the choices between the materials they're going to use a little bit later on in the race. And also thinking about the sort of tyre pressures they're going to put the last riders to start on.
Well, that was a thorough ride by Nikias Arndt, and inspired, of course, because he is German. He's racing on German soil today, and the Germans, if they live according to all the threats, are going to have a field day as this race unfolds today. A surprise leader, though, at the moment. There he is, Nikias Arndt, 16 minutes 20 seconds. A very good time, but second better than 5 times Ukrainian champion Grifko there, and Colbrelli now down to third. And we'll see. It's his first Tour de France as well. What a way to ride your first Tour de France when you ride it right here in your home soil. Rafael Majka, 2 times a winner of the King of the Mountains. But there are no mountains on the stage today. The Tour de France on NBCSN is brought to you by Pickle Juice Sport, formulated and proven to stop muscle cramps. Learn more at picklepower.com. By TireRack.com. Find, deliver, install smarter. And by Lululemon, official wardrobe provider of the Tour de France on NBC. Live a life you love. Back with the time trial, 52 riders have now left the start house at the 198. We build towards the big names, towards the end of the start list. Conditions are holding. They're not deteriorating, put it that way, just at the moment in time. And there's no change. A little bit of a surprise, Nikias Arndt, who won the Cadel Evans road race in Australia at the start of the season, which is a big win for him. Riding his first Tour de France, has got the best time at the moment, 16 minutes and 20 seconds. So we'll just keep an eye on things just now. Hollenstein of Switzerland will be the next rider to go, and the man after him will be Rafael Majka. We saw him warming up just before we went to commercial there. Majka riding his 4th Tour de France, and in that short time he's won the King of the Mountains twice and 3 stages of the event. But he's not a known time trial rider. Looking at Paul Martins here, he's just made his start with trepidation out of that slippery start house. And I think for him it's a day of simply getting around the course.
He's probably rattled a little bit by the fact that he would by now have heard through the race radio in his ear that his teammate Dylan Groenewegen had that very nasty crash. All of these little bits of information will get communicated back to these riders just so they know which are the most dangerous corners out on the course. So he slows down.
Yes, he's just taking it very careful. Back to the start house. This is Rafael Majka here now, who's had 3 wins, just for the records, in Rissoul, Pla d'Adet and Cauterets. Mountain stages indeed. So there's no mountains on the tour today. This year he's looking for his 3rd victory in the King of the Mountains.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top.
Look the way the organisation these last 2 years have put a picture of the rider up with his name. It's very helpful for the commentators, I have to say. As he rides away, there is the River Rhine. Well, you don't quite make Paris on the River Rhine, not far away. It's a long road for these boys, though.
Tour de France started this year in Germany, so my home country.
The only time in my life that I can participate in a Grand Depart in my home country.
I was born in Berlin. My parents definitely come. They have a proper fan club there, I hope.
I'm really looking forward to see the atmosphere in Germany.
I think we will see a lot of happy Germans also celebrating the sport and the start of the Tour de France.
Well, as we come back on screen here with German riders leading this race at the moment overall, and looking at Raphael Maika in action, still Nikias Arndt is on top of the leaderboard. His time 16 minutes and 20 seconds, 1 second ahead of Ondrej Grivko, and Colbrelli is third. Well, as we continue to look at the pack pictures with the Germans in the lead, we are hosted by Düsseldorf today for the Grand Depart of the Tour de France in the 104th year for the event. It's not the first time, though, the race has made its start in Germany. Let's go back to West Berlin, 1987.
When the Tour last started in Germany, a wall divided the city of Berlin, host of the Grand Depart. Built in 1961 by East Germany as a physical sign of separation, the wall became the most enduring symbol of the Cold War. In 1987, exactly 30 years ago, the Tour de France began with the wall as its backdrop. At the time, there was a dream. The dream of including East Berlin in Le Tour. That dream was dashed by the East Germans. But in cycling, the walls began to crumble that year. As the Tour left the divided city of Berlin, the first ever Eastern Bloc rider wore the yellow jersey. Lech Piasecki of Poland. It was a powerful symbol of a changing world. 2 years later, in 1989, the wall came down. Some wonder if the Tour's visit helped nudge towards that end. Today we're in Düsseldorf, the fashion capital of Germany. A city completely destroyed in World War II with only a handful of buildings surviving. Today, it's a thoroughly modern and cosmopolitan city risen from the ashes. As 198 riders roll down the starting ramp today, the unified fans at the side of the road no longer wonder if their heroes are from the East or the West.
Yes, 30 years on, times have changed, and since 2013, Germany have won the most stages in the Tour de France, a magnificent score of 21, largely through their great sprinters in this event, and they're here again this time here in Germany. On the time trial day today, it's 14 kilometres of racing. This is Thibaut Pinot underway at the moment. Well, we are delighted to say we have one of the most famous former East Germans on our squad in Jens Voigt. And Jens, what's your thoughts on the situation now?
We have seen one crash, unfortunately. Let's hope it stays like that. But the rain clearly has an influence on the race. Times are slower. So I hope it dries up a little bit. And we got the big names in the end, putting on some really good times here.
And Jens, your memories going back to the dark days of East Germany and West Germany?
Well, to be perfectly honest, it wasn't too dark for me. I still liked my home country back in the days, East Germany. But yes, we were there. I was in Berlin at the sports school we had in Eastern Berlin, and we were listening to this international radio station to follow every single result of the Tour de France. We were trying to soak it up as much as we could, but we were still locked out on the other side of the wall.
Yeah, I can understand that the wall came down, you all became one, and now the result is here in Düsseldorf. German cyclists, Jens, they're amongst the favourites to lead this tour by the end of this day. That's incredible, yeah?
Well, it is. Here's the plan. Tony Martin wins today, takes yellow. Tomorrow, Kittel wins, takes over yellow. On the third day, Peter Sagan's going to win in a German team and takes over the Lears jersey again. We Germans got it all under control.
Thanks, Jens Voigt. Jens Voigt, for those that don't know, has ridden the Tour de France a record-breaking 17 times, and now with us. Peter Sagan, Jens has just mentioned him. There he is, warming up, getting ready for his start in the time trial.
This guy really is becoming a little bit of a god in the sport of cycling, a rock star in California, and certainly he's a man who would like to put in a fine performance this afternoon.
Well, as we look out across Düsseldorf, there's no change in the standings at the moment. Nicholas Arndt, a German, 16 minutes and 20 seconds. A second up on Andrei Grifko. BC. And remember, Dale Jr. said recently that he'd like to get a win for both him and his father. He's taken another claim at the track. They both dominated. Quick glimpse of the Rhine River and then back onto the race course here as we pick up Thibaut Pinot here, who's keeping his powder dry and not saying he's racing to win this race when we get to Paris in 3 weeks' time, but he is a man who's been on the podium.
Yeah, well, Phil, when I talked to his team before the start of this race, they made it very clear that here at the Tour de France, he just wants to try and have a crack at stage victories once we get down into the mountains. And I'm not really surprised at that decision by Thibaut Pinot, because after all, he did finish a very strong 4th overall in the Giro d'Italia.
Yes, now we'll see if that was his effort for the season or whether he really will change direction. Remember, the Tour de France hasn't been won by a Frenchman since 1985. Bernard Hinault is the great man who, by the way, won 22 time trials during his reign of the Tour de France. That's more than anybody else. Let's go inside the race. Rejoin Steve Perino. Steve.
I'm just behind Rafa Maika in the Bora Hansgrohe team car. And I just want to update you. Well, first of all, what Jens said about Germany right now. While he was looking across the wall back 1987 to get information, the people, they are surrounding this course. You don't see it on your images. At least 10 bodies deep every kilometer of this race. And so the outpouring of affection for this race is certainly deep.
Yeah.
As far as the weather goes, we are not drying out at all. Along the straightaways, because the cars are aerializing and going faster, you're starting to dry out. In the corners, I can tell you, every corner seems to have a crosswalk with red paint in it. It is still greasy in there. So I put it back to you experts as whether or not the GC contenders on a day like today are willing to take those extra bits of risk in the corner to get every single second, or maybe we might see an upset of someone that doesn't have the GC on the line.
That is a very, very good point. And I suspect, Steve, you're not in an open-top car at the moment following that rider, are you? But don't answer that. You're fine. Well, as you know, with this course, Paul, this Düsseldorf is the 6th highest city in quality of life in the world. Yet it seems to be a myriad of crossovers and traffic lights.
Yeah, but just to come back to the point that Steve Perino was bringing up there, I don't think the guys who are trying to win this race overall will take risks at points that we were just following Pinot into there around that corner, because they realise that a crash could lose them 10, 15, 20 seconds. They'll do whatever they can to go to maximum pace in the straight lines, but guys like Chris Froome and Richie Porte a little bit later on in the afternoon will not take the risks in the corners.
Another man we might expect to perhaps win a stage, at least Pierre Rolland, the French hope, who is taking the start.
And as you can see, just looking at Pierre Rolland as he comes out of the starting gate, once again, as we started to think that the afternoon was going to dry out in the latter part, well, the rain and the skies have opened up once again.
Yes, and that's a great shame in many, many ways here. Looks like Benoit Holstein coming up towards the finish here. Katusha rider, not piercing the leaderboard. He's in the top 6 though. 16 seconds off Grifko is still the best time at that first checkpoint. Grifko though conceded 5 seconds at the finishing line. That looks like a 16-minute 40 seconds. So he's only about 20 seconds off the race lead. That's a pretty good time.
Well, the next rider to come into the finishing line should be Rafa Maika, who we were following just a few moments ago out on the course.
Let's see if Maika, I don't feel as though Maika has turned in a particularly special time trial today. Neither would he do so, I wouldn't have thought, in these conditions. He's a man of the mountains, and he does have good form. so he's not going to take risks today. A lot of the flags from Peter Sagan's country there waving up the home straight.
Well, he's not going to take the overall lead, Phil, as you look at his time there, but he might be thinking further down the road, and it could be complicated for Bara Hansgrohe team here because they've got Peter Sagan who'll be looking for individual stages, but this guy just leading up to the Tour de France, he in fact won the overall classification in the recently finished Tour of Slovenia.
Well, the crowd see the colours of Peter Sagan's team and they just go mad here. He's the most popular cyclist, but this is his teammate Rafał Majka here. He's certainly trundling a very big gear as he comes up towards the finishing line, but the best time has long since slipped away. 16:20 is the best time at the moment. He's over half a minute down on that. 11th place. Now, all the flags are out. That was a dress rehearsal, seeing Rafał Majka come home, because this man will be the next man when we come back after the break, and that is Peter Sagan. He's ridden the Tour de France 5 times. He's never lost the green point jersey. We'll see in a moment. This is the arrival of Thibaut Pinot, mouth wide open. He was down 21 seconds at the 8 kilometres check, but he's given it a good shot, Paul.
Well, over the last couple of years, Bill, he really has tried to improve his time trialling ability, and for him, this is just really a question of a reference point. He doesn't want to lose or throw away any time in the first few days of this Tour de France, and if he gets into the last week of the Tour, still in with a chance, he'll look to put in a fine performance and try and get himself in the top 10, top 5, and maybe dream of a podium.
At this stage of the race, that's what they must do when they've got the all-round ability. He's finished third in the Tour de France in the past, and so he's come in with a reasonable time, 16:54. It just loses a few seconds to the race leaderboard, but he's more interested in what the big names do behind him, and then you'll see if he's still in contention as we start to unfold in this opening few days of the Tour de France.
And let's not forget, for a rider who didn't have a very good time trial reference a number of years ago, in fact, he was a former national time trial champion of France.
Getting back out on course here now as we look at Carlos Betancourt, waiting for Peter Sagan. There he is in the start house now, waiting for the countdown, putting on another quest for the green jersey, which is the most consistent daily finisher on the Tour de France. And that's a green jersey created in 1953 for those that could not win the final yellow jersey of the Tour. 10 seconds.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1,
See, I told you, he is so popular. Peter Sagan has got his whole fan club down the straight.
And I'll tell you one thing, Phil, do not expect him to take an easy ride around here, because not only is he thinking about winning the green jersey points competition for the 6th time in a row, equaling the absolute record with Eric Zabel, he is also thinking of a couple of days further down the road to try and grab some time bonuses to get himself the yellow jersey. And he is a rider who will take serious risks going around these corners, because he's probably one of the best bike handlers in the business.
Absolutely right, he is. And we'll see what he's done. He went into that corner pretty quick, but he corrected it straight away. Well, as he gets underway, I've got a feeling in that open-top car behind him, oh, we switched off him now, but we'll still trek in with Steve Perino. Steve.
I have just jumped in behind Peter Sagan, and I watched Pachavia, who came across the line with Rafał Majka, sprinted up about 40 cars and jumped into the car so he could be behind his man, Peter Sagan. As he was running, I said, what do you think about this weather? He said exactly what you just said, Paul. If it stays wet and treacherous, the odds of him staying close to the best guys have just increased. Before the day started, he said, really, it's pretty optimistic for him to lose really any less than about 1 second per kilometer, so 14 seconds over the stretch of this to the best guy. But when you look at the time bonuses, as you mentioned, over the next few days, 14 seconds, that might just put him in the yellow jersey come stage 3.
Well, but we can just see Mickey Shah coming up to the finishing line. He's one of the riders from Team BMC. It's a solid ride by him, but Pachavia, that Steve Perino was referring to there, is the team manager and the confidant of Peter Sagan.
We'll see. Now, here we go. The NBC Sports Cycling Challenge is back. You can sign up, select your teams. This year, thanks to Canyon, you could win a Canyon Aeroad CF SLX Disc 9 LTD, plus daily prizes like today's featured prize, which is a Feedback Sports Team Edition toolkit. There it is. And remember to join in, go to nbcsports.com/challenge. Best of luck. Very popular competition. Well, the man who's won this tour 3 times and the defending champion, he's just arrived. There he is, keeping out the rain. Chris Froome is a little way off yet from his start in this opening day of the Tour de France. Today, the action continues from Olympia Fields as the LPGA Tour's biggest stars compete to claim the second major of the season. Coverage of the KPMG Women's PGA Championship continues today, 3 p.m. Eastern on NBC. Can't give you any more of the weather forecast than to say it's pretty grim out here in Düsseldorf at the moment. We're watching Peter Sagan ballet dance his way around the prologue course. And let's see how Steve Perino's getting on, because he's right behind him in a car. Steve.
I am in a car, and I'm just behind Sagan, who just passed a train, which is somehow appropriate for a superhero like him. But going across the bridge, that area there has developed into quite a headwind. And I've been now around the track 3 different times, and it's built with each additional loop.
Wow, well, that's interesting because, of course, the big names who fancy their chances, not just at winning today, but also winning this race overall in Paris. 3 weeks tomorrow away from the finish line today. They're not going to want the weather to change much worse than it is now.
They certainly won't, and I'm sure they'll be looking at this performance by Peter Sagan out on the course, who was really, as you say, Phil, been taking a number of risks rowing around that corner. This is Pierre Rolland, the rider from Cannondale-Drapac. He doesn't really have too many hopes on an individual time trial. His goals further down the road are thinking about getting himself individual stage victories and, of course, helping his American teammate, Andrew Talansky.
Rolland's average speed at the moment running at around 30 miles an hour here. They need to go, they reckon, about 33 to win this race today. We won't know the answer for that for a while or so just now, but Pierre Rolland is battling through the conditions. I must say, the crowd here in Germany, in Düsseldorf, terrific crowd. Jens, what about the crowd in your country of Germany?
Well, I'm happy that so many people came out here today to see the race, but if you just look at Pierre Rolland's bike, he is having a race bottle in his bottle cage, and that is not to drink at all. That's just clear for an aerodynamic advantage, because you don't bring a race bottle on a cold time trial like today. So he is just looking for every little second he can gain with a little aerodynamic advantage.
That's very observant of you there, Jens. Well done. Well, we're just in Castelviejo make his start, Paul. This is back. There's the bottle. You can see it on the down seat tube of his bike there, that black bottle. And it is shaped aerodynamically.
Well, everything you can do just to try and make the rear end of the bicycle just a little bit smoother, to smoothen the air around the back end of the bike. That's what Pierre Rolland has done here. But you can also see at the front he's got those very deep section aerodynamic rims as well. And it's all to do with aerodynamics in this instance, over 14 miles of racing. And these riders, in fact, kilometres, I'm sorry, they are covering these 1 kilometre sections at around about 1 minute and 10 seconds. So they really are ripping around this course in excess, of, you said, Phil, as 30 miles an hour.
Well, so far we're waiting to see what Peter Sagan does as we pick him up here, and as he gets to the 8 kilometre checkpoint, see what he can do, because he looks to me as though he's giving this a very good shot. He's certainly not just taking a ride around Düsseldorf in the rain, that's for sure.
Well, as his team manager was saying, Phil, just a little earlier on, there are not too many complicated corners on this race route around here, and if Peter Sagan was thinking about losing maybe a second per kilometre, I think he could gain a couple of seconds back per corner the way he's throwing his bikes around these.
Just on his skills, absolutely. The conditions should suit him. Back to Pierre Rolland here. Former stage winner in the Tour de France on 2 occasions, up the big mountains of La Toussuire and the famous Alpe d'Huez. We're not sure yet just where he fits into the overall situation just now. We're just getting information now that Peter Sagan, as we watch the arrival of Pierre Rolland, he's gone through that 8 kilometre check, 4 seconds behind Ondrej Grivko. And at the time, that was the same as Nikias Arndt, who was 4 seconds behind Grivko. And Arndt is in, currently, with the best time. So it's on.
Well, it is definitely on. This rider's just trying to close out his 14-kilometre, 8.7-mile ride around downtown Düsseldorf, and it's Pierre Rolland, France. Had a very good victory during the recent Giro d'Italia. And when you look at the clock, Phil, you can get an indication of just how much time riders can lose over 8.7 miles. He's going to lose himself as he stops the clock there, almost 1 minute margin on the current leader in this race, who is Nikias Arndt of Germany.
Yep, it looks like a 59-second loss there to the German first-timer in this race, Nikias Arndt. And we've got a new best time has just gone through at the 8-kilometre checkpoint in Matteo Trentin. 9 minutes 24, it's all beginning to change, but at the moment Nikias Arndt still leads this opening day of the Tour with 16 minutes 20. Housed in a former hunting palace, the Goethe Museum in Düsseldorf boasts the largest private collection of German Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's work in the world. Founded in 1953, it consists of around 50,000 items, including manuscripts, books, paintings, drawings, busts, and arts and crafts. Goethe is considered one of the most influential Germans in history and played a key role in creating the literary genre of Romanticism. Back in the drizzle here in Düsseldorf with the opening day of the Tour de France. Yes, we're starting in Germany as we're looking at the former world champion Kirienka, and a chance to show you the new colours for the Tour de France of Team Sky. Gone is the black to white, but let's get straight back to Peter Sagan. He's approximately 2 kilometres out from the finish ball.
Yeah, that's about a mile, and when we spoke to his team before the start of this race, they said that they wanted to make him finish today between 14 to 15 seconds down on the first place rider in the overall standings after the end of today, because he then felt that by the end of stage 3, with the time bonuses out on the course, he would have a chance of getting himself the yellow jersey. We're very close to seeing what that's going to be, because at the first time check out on the course, Phil, he was only 7 seconds adrift on Matteo Trentin, who has the new best time at that point.
Yes, Trentin's behind Sagan, so he's still to come in. 1 kilometre to go. Let's check in with Steve Perino, because you're behind Peter Sagan. Steve.
I can tell you that he was dealing with much more difficult conditions than our leaders with the fast times went through. Talked to his director earlier. He said the one thing he wanted to make sure is that Peter didn't go too hard early. He expects him to have a big kick here at the end.
Right, well, we'll know all of the answers very shortly. He's about 700 metres from the finishing line here now. He's shooting at the time at the moment of 16 minutes 20 seconds. He's on 15:48. He's got an outside chance here of having come home in these difficult conditions slightly better than Nikias Arndt. He's the leader. Remember that Trentin behind him is a few seconds quicker as well. Well, if it comes down to the crowd, they'll bring him home.
Well, they will. He's got inside of 15 seconds now to get himself to the finish line. I think he's going to go outside the time of Nikias Arndt, but it's going to be very, very close on the line.
He looks at the finishing line, he puts his head down, he drives, he looks, where is it? He puts his head down, he drives again. This is our Peter Sagan, the man we've come to love. Every time he races for his people. The time has gone by, but remember, he wants only to be within touching distance of the leader tonight. He's got the third best time, 9 seconds off the pace. That might do.
Well, I think that's a very solid ride by Peter Sagan. I think when he goes back and has a look at it, he'll be quite satisfied this afternoon. But we've got, Phil, some very big specialists to come into the finishing line, including this rider now, who set the fastest time at the first time check. The sprinter on Team Quick-Step, Matteo Trentin.
This is Matteo Trentin, who's coming through here. I think he's caught and passed Rick Zabel there in his first tour. It's his dad, Eric, who has won the record of green jerseys in the past. And now his son's taking part in his first tour. And Eric, of course, and Rick are Germans. But this could be a new best time here. Matteo Trentin, has he prevailed all the way to the line? Yes, he has. He's come in with an average speed of 32.1.
It was 16:13 or 16:14 as we get a chance to look on the banner over the finishing line. So that is a new best time by the Italian rider, better known for his forte against the sprinters rather than against the clock.
Yes, well, that is a little bit of a turn-up for the Bucks. Remember, the conditions may be playing a part now as we run down towards the first half of the field from the start house. Trentin, the new leader. Half the field has now started in today's opening time trial, but the big names are still to come here. These are the men shooting long for the win in Paris in just over 3 weeks. The American Andrew Talansky goes 11 minutes past 8. That's Eastern time in the USA. Fulsang, who's riding very well. Looking down the list here, Esteban Chavez, the Colombian, he goes at midday. Richie Porte also down to Chris Froome, the last man to ride at 12:32. The weather may well have its say yet. Let's check in with the boys upstairs.
Thank you very much, and I want to pick it up with a couple of names you just said, Chris Froome, Richie Porte, and then throw in the weather. For the two leading contenders, the top guy and the one you see just after him, considering how much it's raining and it's going to get even harder in the next 10 to 15 minutes, what should their game plan be?
Well, Richie Porte, probably it's his advantage because of the bad weather. It makes the course more technical, coming in and out of the corners, a big disadvantage to the riders not so good at the time trial discipline, like Bardet, like Nairo Quintana especially. But for Froome and Porte, as long as the weather doesn't change too much between them, they should have at least the same opportunity against each other. But they do have an advantage, the worse the weather is, against the guys not so good at the time trial discipline.
Yeah, and the other thing is you have to think about trying to get into the rhythm without there. When when it's raining, you have to slow down to more or less walking speed through some of these corners and accelerating back up to 30-some miles an hour. The best time so far, he has 32-mile-an-hour average speed. So if you're going only 12, maybe 10 miles an hour through some of these corners, think of how hard it is to accelerate over 22 miles per hour back up to speed and over a few times. I've counted more or less about 11 corners throughout, so it's really still, it's not that technical, but we've seen plenty of crashes out there, plenty of people coming home with ripped skin suits.
Yeah, a lot of speeding up and slowing down with those 11 turns out there. Maybe a stretch to call Andrew Talansky one of the contenders. I did hear Bob say earlier, potentially a top 10 kind of guy if everything goes right. Wonder what he's listening to there. We do know his start time is coming up. Get you back out live to the race here in Düsseldorf just after this.
Brought to you by Illumination and Universal's new film, Despicable Me 3. This summer, Gru and the Minions are going back to villainy. Despicable Me 3, now playing. Well, welcome back to the Mr. Düsseldorf here, but let me show you this. This is Kirienka finishing now. He set the best time at 8 kilometers, 4 seconds better than Trentin, who's in with the best time at the moment. The former world champion of 2 years ago looks to be on good form here for Team Sky.
He's gone out very, very quickly, 9 minutes and 20 seconds at the first time check, and this is going to be a new best time. He's going to go inside the time fill of Matteo Trentin.
Well, Matteo Trentin, the sprinter, was a surprise, but Kirienka isn't. That is a new best time for Kirienka, 16 minutes and 11 seconds.
And lest we forget, he's a teammate of Chris Froome, who's the last man to start. And all of the information from this ride, whether it's the power, whether it's the wind, or how fast you can go around a corner, will get sent back to Chris Froome.
You bet your life. Well, this is what happened out on the road. Kirienka was absolutely storming it. He caught Ben Gastow here, started a minute ahead of him. He really was shooting high this time, but it wasn't all plain sailing. Watch his back wheel. Now he nearly lost it as he braked for that left-hander, but he got round safely.
And that was the fault. He just applied the brakes just a little bit too much, but he had the control to keep himself nicer. This is Jack Bauer, the Kiwi national champion in the individual time trial too.
He's riding in his 4th tour, but he had a tricky old start out of the start house, I must say. And I think we can show you that as well. Jack is still to finish, by the way, as he made the start. This was it. Watch it. What? It's so difficult. You can see the rain is coming down now. Well, the forecast today said it would be at its heaviest at 5 o'clock local time. It is 1 minute to 5 as we commentate. We're in the second half of the field. The men who are hoping to win this time trial may have the trickiest of conditions.
And that little fumble coming out of the starting gate was really a combination of the nervousness of lining up for a big individual time trial, the power of Jack Bauer kicking away from the starting house, and just a little bit of moisture on the starting ramp.
Jack Bauer is a superb bike rider, and he's going to give it his best shot. As you saw there, he is the champion of his country, New Zealand. Let's see how he takes this right-hander. With trepidation, I think, is the best way to say that. He's ridden this race 4 times. I remember back in 2013, Paul, he crashed into that barbed wire fence just 2 days from the finish and was out of his first tour.
Yes, it was a lot of bad luck for him. He's not had a good relationship with the Tour de France over the years. As we look here at Jürgen Roelandts, because a couple of years ago he was well on his way to winning a stage of the Tour de France, and he got caught 50 metres, or 50 yards if you'd like, in old-fashioned money, before the finishing line, and he still managed to finish inside the top 10 on the stage.
Well, they couldn't get past him. It was a 222-kilometre breakaway, and I noted at the time he was caught 20 metres from the line. Absolutely, that was into Nîmes in the south of France. How unlucky that was. Let's go back down to the start house. This is John Degenkolb, another German cyclist fighting back from serious injury last year. He's back now, and he's not a great time trialist, but watch for him tomorrow in the sprint.
Well, although he is one of the very top sprinters in the world, he in fact told us, or his team told us before the start of this race, Phil, he's not really thinking about the sprint in this race. It's all about Alberto Contador, first of all trying to get him onto the podium, but also trying to get him a victory at the Tour de France.
Well, he's off on the road in his 5th Tour de France, and so far he's finished every one he's ridden. So he's got 4 finishes under his belt and no stage wins to his credit. Kirienka still leads at the checkpoint, still leads at the finishing line, 16 minutes 11 seconds. Might go the distance, Kirienka, 16 minutes 11. No, I think we can improve on that.
I think we will towards the end, but like many riders, he's thinking about the latter part of the season. Not only is he thinking about the Tour de France here, we're all about the Tour de France here in the month of July, but and as Jens Voigt mentioned just a little bit earlier on, that maybe Chris Froome has had a quieter start to this year, 2017, because he wants to reach peak form during the Tour de France and go on to try and win the Tour of Spain at the end of the year as well.
Well, certainly the bad weather has not diminished the crowd at all here. Now, of course, the top German cyclist, a former 7 times champion of Germany and 4 times a world champion, all smiles there. He knows the pressure's on him. He is the man expected to win for Germany today and carry the yellow jersey to Belgium tomorrow. He doesn't look nervous to me. The Tour de France on NBCSN is brought to you by Jelly Belly Sport Beans, clinically proven to improve sports performance. By Lizard Skins, see what pros choose at lizardskins.com. And by Chocolate Milk, trusted by athletes, backed by science. Well, let's get back out on course in the time trial to a former world road race champion here, the first Polish man to win the world title as a pro, and that's Kwiatkowski. Michał Kwiatkowski is also the first Polish rider to win the classic races Amstel Gold in Holland, not very far away actually from where we are, and also Milan-San Remo, which he did this year. He's on course as the national champion of Poland, and the man right behind him, Steve Perino.
Well, Phil, I don't know how well you can see his skin suit, but I can tell you that Team Sky got them in just yesterday, and that technology was, to some iteration, was on the back of Geraint Thomas at the Giro d'Italia, where he was second in the time trial. It has been updated. They work with some people up in Norway that also happen to work with the Norwegian Alpine team. Well, I know some of those folks, so a couple hours ago I called. I said, how real is it? The guy I talked to said, when we use their textiles with that technician in there, sometimes the difference between what is ultimately modern material, little tweaks in it, in the wind tunnel can be 50 to 60% difference when it comes to wind resistance. That is enormous. And he said if they're using that guy, they've got the best.
Wow. Well, they changed the colours, of course, Team Sky, white, which is rather good for Kwiatkowski. He's now the champion of Poland, and he's got only had to put a red band on it. He's got the national jersey on.
It's just quite amazing how everybody is just looking for an improvement everywhere, and the body is the most difficult part to make aerodynamic. So if you cover the body with an aerodynamic suit, as we've just seen with Michał Kwiatkowski a few moments ago, that can be a huge difference at the end of just 14 kilometres or 8.7 miles.
Well, coming up now towards the line, this is Jürgen Roelandts here, former champion of Belgium, heading up towards the finish. He's not going to upset any boats. He was lying 6th at the, but 18 seconds behind Kirienka at 8 kilometres. And judging by his body language here, I think he's going to finish somewhere in the 6th to 7th position, I would say. Best time 16:11 by Kirienka. the Belarus on the Sky team, has gone by, well gone by now. And in fact, Jürgen Roland's dropping down the leaderboard here as he looks for a 15th, 16th place finish, even worse.
Well, he's thinking about tomorrow, Phil. Let's not forget we're going down into Belgium, which is the home country of this team, Lotto Soudal. And although they are a Belgian team, they've got a German sprinter who would like to get the victory into Liège tomorrow. 32nd place for Jürgen Roland, but tomorrow he'll be looking to lead out the big German sprinter, Andre Greipel, for a possible stage victory into Liège.
So as he winds down, I can tell you that Andrew Talansky has taken to the start. Oh, no, here he is in the start house. Sorry, running ahead of my watch here. Andrew Talansky, the American rider. You know, you never just know what to expect from Andrew Talansky. I think we can safely say he won't win today. But is he going to be a man who will challenge finally into Paris? There's a possibility.
I think there is. He's a changed man this year, I think.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop.
Yes, he's a changed man now. He's a father now. In fact, he told us he'd had a baby, but he's got himself back into shape. But in fact, his wife has had the baby very recently, as he now gets himself onto the start of the Tour de France. As we swing again out on course now, this is Jaco Ventner from South Africa. And he's the time trial champion of his country as he now rides in the Tour de France finally. And Dimension Data is a team which has come here with hopes of stage wins rather than a shot at the final overall.
Well, this man has given us a lot of pleasure, Phil, over the last many years. He's worn the yellow jersey in the Tour de France on 2 occasions. He's now riding out his last Tour de France. And, of course, do I need to introduce him? Can you not recognise that style? It's Thomas Voeckler.
Oh, you're right. And he's riding his 20th 3-week Grand Tour, which is incredible. He's not far away from retirement now. But I'll guarantee that over the next 3 weeks, we will talk about this man. He cannot stay a prisoner of the big peloton for long. 15th career Tour de France appearance, 20 Grand Tours in all. When he finished 4th, he had the yellow jersey for a while as well. So as he continues on the long straight here, he knows all about the face pulling and the emotion of the Tour de France, because this race discovers it all. Look at this. This is Romain Bardet, the great French hope here, and we told you all about him in our preview show. He's got a nice demeanour, that man, and we hope he does well for France. Boy, they need some help this year. Big challenge. We're back in Dortmund for the time trial here. It is the opening day of the 3-week and 1-day Tour de France. We have 2 rest days during the route that takes us round and round. Time for me now to introduce you to the Road ID Pop Quiz. Now remember, today's question, it's the first stage of this year's Tour de France, will be set on the banks of which river? We may have mentioned it once or twice, so go for it. That's the Road ID quiz. And looking through there, I can tell you as we watch these pictures that the former world road champion, Michael Kwiatkowski, has gone through the checkpoint at 8 kilometres with a time of 9:20. So it's not quite the time of Kirienka, but it's equal. And there he is, locked in time at 8 kilometres. 2 men now. Will he take the lead when he gets home? Be there as another chapter in the Earnhardt legacy comes to a close. Dale Jr. takes to the track at historic Daytona International Speedway one final time. Tonight at 7 Eastern, only on NBC. Dale Earnhardt Jr., by the way, will start from the pole in his last race at Daytona as a full-time driver. Well, as we look out again, the mist isn't going away, but the weather's holding. This is Kwiatkowski here, the champion of Poland on Team Sky. And guess who's following him, just seeing how he's getting on. Well, he's getting on very well. He's setting the best time at the moment. There he is, Chris Froome, the last man to start, noting everything that Michael Kwiatkowski is doing. Kwiatkowski has gone through with the best time, equal, in fact, with Kirienka, another rider on Team Sky.
Yes, Chris Froome there, sitting in the team car, getting every last little bit of information that he can squeeze out of this individual time trial. His start time is going to be at 32 minutes past 6 here local time, and that's in around about an hour and 10 minutes. Once he gets out of this team car, Phil, he will make it very quickly over to the warming house and get himself onto the turbo trainer to get his engine hot and running for his 8.7 mile test.
And Sky have the top 2 places sitting in the overall classification at the moment. Kirienka leads with 16 minutes 11 seconds, and we're waiting to see now if Kwiatkowski can confirm his time at that 8-kilometer check with going on the leaderboard here. He's hitting 1 kilometer to go now. Currently, Kirienka leads at the finishing line by 3 seconds over Matteo Trentin. Nikias Arndt, who was the leader, down to 3rd place now. Peter Sagan slips to 5th. This is going to be very, very close. Kwiatkowski was equal with his teammate, split by tenths of a second at the 8-kilometer check. But looking at that body language, Paul, he could be going ahead.
Well, that's what he wants to do, but more importantly, he wants to send benchmarks out on the course for Chris Froome to use as reference points. A rider who switched across to Team Sky last year. He had a little bit of a hard time fitting into the program, but this year he really has come back to the great champion that he was a couple of years ago with a victory in the one-day classic early on, Milan-San Remo. This is a rider who could be, and I think Bob Roll and Christian referred to it a little earlier on, this could be the secret weapon for Chris Froome once we get into the mountains, Michael Kwiatkowski, because yes, he's riding a very good individual time trial here, Phil, but he can climb as well.
Well, he's spearheaded the Polish attack now since he turned pro in 2010. Is he going to come home with the best time here? It's going to be very close. He hits the line, 16:11. He has slipped away just a bit as he drops into 3rd place and loses 8 seconds to Kirienka. So he didn't come home as quickly as Kirienka did. Nonetheless, Sky now hold 1st and 3rd with Trentin in 2nd place. Let's have a look at the updating situation. We go back out on course there with Jaku Venter. This is Bernie Eisel, sorry, of Dimension Data out on course. There's the overall situation at the finish now. Kirienka 16:11, Trentin a quick step 3 seconds back. Kwiatkowski comes in 3rd place.
Well, Phil, if anybody out there is questioning the ability of Team Sky to support Chris Froome in the Tour de France this year, I think you can see in 1st and 3rd place currently at the finishing line. The individual time trial is always a good reference point as to how your body's physical form is coming into an event like this. And so far, you can put 2 very big ticks by Kirienka and Kwiatkowski for Team Sky.
Well, Kwiatkowski had a great one-day classic season. It started with a win in Milan-San Remo, then 2nd in a race he's won before in nearby Holland, then the Amstel Gold Race, then he raced well in Belgium, the 3rd in Liège-Bastogne-Liège. It's Liège tomorrow where this race will finish its stage, and so it's all looking good for Mikel Kwiatkowski at the moment. We stay out on course here with Bernie Eisel. We're well into the 2nd half of the field now, and we'll be seeing soon the new champion of the time trial, Daryl Impey. He's already started.
Everybody in the Tour de France, Phil, has a different role. Some guys want to try and win individual time trials. Some guys want to win the sprint stages. This man's job over many years of Bernie Eisel has been to nurse Mark Cavendish through the mountain stages to make sure that the British sprinter doesn't get eliminated. And he really pretty much is, once we think about Dimension Data on the road, he's the real captain.
Looks as though we've got a little situation here where Thomas Voeckler has gone behind the action here because Robert Hessink, a Dutchman, who's now gone over the top of, indeed, Thomas Voeckler. Let's check in with Steve Schlanger just outside in the rain.
Well, Phil, a lot of directors have told me about the days where to get a look at a course like this, they would unfold a map on the hood of a car. Now, fast forward to this year, and Team Lotto Jumbo is actually using virtual reality, headsets like this, to have their favorites, Van Emden and also Roglic, get a true feel for what this course is going to be like. Van Emden and Roglic spent yesterday and also this morning wearing these goggles as the team shot the video yesterday with a GoPro camera, imported it into a smartphone, and then it goes into those headsets. And I asked them about the difference between just getting video of the course and virtual reality, and they say what it does, it actually places the riders in the mental headspace of being on the course. They let me try the headset earlier today, and I gotta tell you the truth. it was a little scary. I'm not going to lie. It was freaky good how close it felt to actually being on the road.
Except I suspect you weren't out of breath there, Steve, but nonetheless, yes, they'll try anything these days. And Van Endem had the greatest moment of his life at the last stage of the Giro d'Italia this year when he won the time trial stage. So we'll see how it continues. Looking at Castroviejo here at the moment.
Now, this guy is a man who could win the individual time trial today. Phil, the European champion at the individual time trial and Spanish time trial champion too.
And apt to deliver a surprise. Makes his start here. Well, his third time trial championship just a week before this race starts here in Düsseldorf. Now we're waiting on the arrival of Andrew Talansky at the moment, looking at the 8-kilometre check. He's gone through there in approximately 20th position. I can't look at... Oh, no, wait a minute. They are 17th position. Andrew's gone through, but only 23 seconds off the time of Kwiatkowski.
I tell you what, Phil, just looking at that, this man took a couple of risks going round that corner.
It's very tight on it.
It really didn't seem to ruffle his feathers too much. And this, when we look, is probably one of the most aerodynamic positions. But just look, he's got the knee out there to go around that corner. Whoa, pushing it to the limit.
Absolutely. Let's get out of the finish line. Here comes Andrew Talansky now, looking for a top 17 finish at the moment. Slipped away a little bit on the return. 24th place, 42 seconds off the break.
Well, at half distance, Phil, it looked reasonable, but he's lost a big chunk of time in the second part of this race, and I'm not sure he's going to be too happy with that, because he's thrown away here a good 3/4 of a minute, and the fast men have still yet to come.
Yes, that could see him starting out tomorrow more than a minute behind the projected overall favourites for this race, like Quintana, Contador, Chris Froome, Richie Porte and the like. As they continue to warm up for the big moment now, the time trial is getting down to the men who count. Let's update you with a look at the Giant Bicycles stage summary of this opening day of the Tour de France in Germany. The Grand Départ 2017 Tour has started for the first time in Düsseldorf in Germany. The weather, well, the rain is causing very slick roads. We've had crashes, including Daniel Groenewegen and Rick Zabel. They're fallers. Dylan Groenewegen, I beg your pardon. And current leader, Team Skyrider, Vasily Kirienka, his time 16 minutes and 11 seconds. And at the moment, nobody is challenging that time. Kwiatkowski tried and fell back to finish in third place. This is Zdeněk Štýbar on course.
Newly crowned national champion of the Czech Republic, and he may well be inspired by the ride of his teammate Matteo Trentin, who currently sits in second place at 3 seconds adrift.
Well, this is a former cyclo-cross rider who certainly has made good in the road racing scene, and is no stranger now to the Tour de France either. Had second in Paris-Roubaix this year, and he was so disappointed he never crossed the line in first place, but he has won the Czech Republic's national road race title this year.
Waiting rather eagerly, Phil, to see the arrival at the first time check out on the course by Jonathan Castroviejo of Team Movistar. He's the European and Spanish individual time trial champion. I think that will be the first indication of just how good these rides are by Team Sky, who went through that first checkpoint with the best 2 times with Michael Kwiatkowski and Vasily Kirienka. Kirienka carried on to post the fastest time currently at the finishing time at 16:11, but we're now getting down to the men who are real specialists at the individual time trial.
Well, this is very, very dicey out on course at the moment. This looks as though it's Castroviejo himself.
A slightly different coloured jersey as well. You can see that white jersey he's got with the European rings around the middle. That's the indication that he is the European time trial champion. It's a bit difficult for him because he's a 2-time champion. He's also champion of Spain, but I think he opted for the European jersey.
And this is Dan Olympi, the champion of South Africa here, and he's already caught and passed the man that started ahead of him by 1 minute, Bernard IJssel. As they continue now, and Impey, well, we've got no update on him other than he's setting the 6th best time at the first and only checkpoint, and he's only looking for 8 seconds to take the lead. Well, the Tour de France goes back to 1903. Let's show you some of the greats as we take a break.
Road ID gives you freedom to get out and ride. Check out the all-new Elite Pin Tuck for a class-free option in 6 eye-catching new colors, allowing your loved ones to worry less while you train. Ride over to roadid.com/tour and score $10 off any ID. Road ID. Ride with peace of mind.
Well, this is Daryl Impey coming up towards the finishing line, looking for 8 seconds. He was 7th at the checkpoint. Has he found it now? We're looking for 16:11. He clearly hasn't, as he now rides and slips slowly down the list. Looking at Peter Sagan's time. In the end, a 6th place for the moment for the South African national champion of the time trial. That's, as always, a solid ride from Daryl Impey.
I think that's a pretty impressive ride, actually, by Daryl Impey to get himself inside of the top 10. He's taking a lot of risks out on the course. But this man has gone through the first time check, Castroviejo, with the 4th best time, just 5 seconds adrift. And I have to say, just looking at his position on the bike there, it's what I would describe as a very savage position. He gets down extremely low at the front to make his body as aerodynamic as possible. Very reminiscent of the American rider Dave Zabriskie's position.
Well, the rain still comes down. The favourites, of course, are still to start. This is the man in the hot seat, Vasily Kirienko, a former world champion, still leads the time trial. 3/4 of the field have now gone. His time, 16 minutes, 11 seconds. Today, the action continues from Olympia Fields as the LPGA Tour's biggest stars compete to claim the 2nd major of the season. Coverage of the KPMG Women's PGA Championship continues today, 3 p.m. Eastern on NBC. Getting closer to the big men who are thinking long-term, and that's certainly one of them. Richie Porte, tipped by Chris Froome to be the winner of this year's Tour de France. We'll see. He is the 2015 individual time trial champion, and he will go at 6 minutes past 6 o'clock here in Germany, which is about just over half an hour. Mark Cavendish, who has come into the Tour de France from a sickness, Epstein-Barr disease, which really is a glandular fever. He's battled it. He's come back because this is the Tour de France. He holds 30 stage wins to his credit. He won't be trying to win a stage today, but he still dreams of becoming the most prolific stage winner of the Tour de France in the few years that are still ahead of him. Well, they certainly all know him here in Düsseldorf as he rolls off the ramp, and I think a lot of people will be sending good wishes with him today.
Well, Phil, you mentioned his 30 individual stage victories at the Tour de France. To that, you can add 15 stage victories at the Giro d'Italia and 3 at the Tour of Spain, making 48 Grand Tour stage victories. That, I would have to say, is pretty prolific. But he's now riding into... this is a look back at what happened to George Bennett. Oh. Now, George Bennett, let's not forget, this is, I think, the same corner we saw Dylan Groenewegen, his teammate, crashing a little earlier on. Now, George Bennett is the winner of the Amgen Tour of Gold. Did you see the mechanic slide?
Can't even stand up on it. It's so slippery. No, I don't think it was the same corner, Paul, no. But even so, you're right, and if his name sounds familiar, as Paul said, he won the Amgen Tour of California this year, which got him his selection for the Tour de France.
This is the arrival of Castroviejo coming into the finishing line.
Well, Castroviejo was 4th at the check, but only looking for 5 seconds to get the race lead. Let's see if he's found it. The tie to beat 16:11, he hasn't found it. The European and Spanish time trial champion is slipped away a little bit on this leg, which is a really hot, tough leg of the course on the way back home. Slipping down the rankings here. Now, as he hits the line, he will go 7th at the moment, 16 minutes and 24.
Well, when I talked a little earlier of reference points, Phil, we'll look a little earlier, just a little moment ago, what happened to George Bennett going round that corner. Just see how far he slides. Now, that's impressive enough, but just watch the mechanic coming along here, because the mechanic passes over a bike. Now, he pushes George Bennett away. Now, watch this. It's a good job it's a Dutch team, because let's not forget, the Dutch are actually pretty good at speed skating.
They're very good at speed skating. That's where they take all the medals at the Winter Olympics. As we now continue to rejoin Mark Cavendish here and riding the Tour de France yet again, but hoping that he'll be around to win a couple of stages, because there are 9 stages, we estimate, at least, for the sprinters in this year's Tour de France, and that's more than in recent years.
Well, Phil, when he was diagnosed with Epstein-Barr or glandular fever, the big question was, first of all, would he even participate in the Tour de France? He participated just before this event in the Tour of Slovenia, and he finished well up in the top 4 or 5 positions on a number of the stages. Went to ride a very difficult British National Championships in the Isle of Man, his home island, and then he was picked to participate in the team here. But he is, I have to say, pretty much riding in the unknown.
Picking up Philippe Gilbert out on course now. 20 Grand Tours now as he starts his 20th Grand Tour. Gilbert, champion of Belgium, former champion of Belgium, and tapping out 32 miles an hour just now. I don't think there'll be any heroics from Philippe today, but we'll certainly see him go for the stage wins out on course, that's for sure. The world champion of the time trial, Tony Martin of Team Katusha, warming up once on the same team as Philippe Gilbert out on course. The whole of Germany watching on television, hoping this man will deliver the time required to take the first maillot jaune, the first yellow jersey of the Tour de France.
He starts at 20 minutes past 6 local time. Now, this is Jakob Fuglsang, the winner of the recent Criterium de Dauphiné. And I just wonder, could he be the surprise for Team Astana here at the Tour de France?
Well, he's had his moments this season, and that is for sure. Jakob Fuglsang wants a big result in this year's Tour de France. If there's going to be a surprise this year, you might be looking at it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Winner of the Dauphiné, Paul, I'm sorry, winner of the Dauphiné, and history shows the man that wins the Dauphiné wins the Tour de France a couple of weeks later. We'll see.
Well, we'll see. He had a great performance in Rio de Janeiro last year when he finished second in the Olympic Games. He hadn't really won a race on the road since 2012, but he certainly came to form at the right time just a couple of weeks before the Tour de France in that Criterium de Dauphiné, which is always a serious pointer as to a rider's preparation for the Tour de France. He took that corner quite precariously.
Well, as you can see, this is a slippery surface and the water is resting on top of it there. These white painted bands are absolute mines for these riders. Let's go back to the start house. This is Greg van Avermaet, the Olympic champion, and having a great season.
Isn't that funny? Because the man who starts a minute ahead of him was the silver medalist in Rio last year.
Yes, a very good point. So now we'll see what happens as Greg gets underway. You heard Christian and Bob talk about this man early in our pre-show. We don't know quite where he sits in the team. We do know he tends to ride for himself. Back out with Gilbert on course. No change at the finish. Kirienka, the former world champion, is best time, 16 minutes 11 seconds. The surprise is the second place man, Matteo Trentin, 3 seconds slower, and Kirienka's teammate Kwiatkowski in third, 8 seconds off the lead. Mark Cavendish here, driving on. He'll know now just how he's feeling as he faces up to his 20th Grand Tour. Tomorrow, he would love to do what he's done in the past and win the first road race stage of a Tour de France.
Well, I have to think about a discussion I had with Christian van der Velde just yesterday, Phil, about Mark Cavendish last year. When you think about the fact that at the start of the year he was a world champion, he rode 4 stage victories in the Tour de France and then ended up with a silver medal in the Olympic Games. He had a hard year physically.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised his body said, hey, enough is enough. And he's been out of it ever since, but he's coming back as best he can. He told us before the start he wouldn't have started if this had not been the Tour de France, the race he's fallen in love with, the race he physically and mentally loves. And he's here, and he's looking to better his win target of 30. 34 of his stage wins is the record held by the legendary Belgian Eddy Merckx. So maybe he can nose 1 or 2 closer before Paris, you never know.
There's one thing we cannot doubt with Mark Cavendish is the absolute class of the man, and if he gets a single opportunity to grasp at a stage victory in the opening 10 days of the Tour de France, he'll be there and he'll take it with both hands.
Gilbert, very workmanlike man from Belgium in his 8th Tour de France, out on course. This out on course now is Jakob Fuglsang. We're catching up again with him. He needs a good time today. Not the people who are already finished, but the people who are coming up behind him. He wants to stay close for the men who he thinks are in contention for the final win. The Tour de France is all about time. The man that completes the course in 3 weeks and 1 day in the shortest time wins the race. So the object of everybody is not to lose time so they can battle it out in the mountains.
Well, there are two big names about to get into the starting house in a few moments' time. For Romain Bardet, the Frenchman, and I'm pretty sure that French television will give us great images of him. And the man who will climb up after Romain Bardet will be the next Sky rider to start, Geraint Thomas.
The man who finished second in last year's Tour de France and won a stage at Le Betex, about to take the start. No time to think of what was, it's what is. He will take risks. This man takes risks. He's one of the best descenders. He's an aggressive bike rider. And he can win the Tour de France.
And he's probably one of the most well-learned professional cyclists, because at the end of last year, Phil, he completed his equivalent of an MBA from the Grenoble School of Business Management. So he's got that out of the way. Now he can actually concentrate on this job at hand, and that is trying to go higher than second place overall in the Tour de France last year.
Well, he's got the first corner out of the way, took it well. Straight across those white bands. Absolutely treacherous to cyclists. Now, Geraint Thomas, I saw on Twitter earlier, he said, let's get this time trial going. I'm stoked. I want to get started. Let's get going. Well, now he can get going.
The reason he wants to do that, Phil, is because this morning, before the start, he was actually watching the British and Irish Lions beat the All Blacks in rugby in New Zealand.
And that's something they haven't done for 10 years. So if you want to get going, Geraint, now is the time to go. So he's the man, you may recall a couple of years ago, had that terrible crash running down towards Gap, I think it was, and his white sunglasses going into the trees, which really upset him. The crash was okay, but he lost his white sunglasses. Tony Martin, all of Germany right behind him. The world champion is still a little way to go before he gets underway. He starts 13th from the end. Welcome back. With the time trial still to go is the man riding his first Tour de France. Yes, he's made the selection. Taylor Phinney, after that horrible crash of a couple of years back. He was the prologue winner in 2012 in the Giro d'Italia. Now, it's not really a prologue today, but it is the first stage of the Tour de France. And the question, Paul, is, can he do it?
Well, the one thing he said before the start, Phil, when he saw these weather conditions, was the fact that a lot of riders will not take too many risks and it'll bring everybody down to his level. But I think he was playing a very quiet game. This is Romain Bardet.
Taking it rather gently around there, and I don't blame him, because looking out of our commentary box window, we're situated just 50 metres from the finishing line. It's looking really miserable out there. It's pretty chilly. It's cool indeed. It's inside about 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And the roads, as you can see, really treacherous. And so as we're looking here now, as the rides continue, as they will do for quite a way yet, and this race, I have to say, is beginning to hot up, but nobody challenging Vasily Kirienka's time at the moment.
This is Alberto Contador. I'm just trying to see what he was doing there.
Interesting racing jersey he's got.
He's just trying to fit his radio in the back there, just to make sure he gets all of the information
like his
required.
telephone come iPad to me. Got to show his helper there how it works. Needs the password. Let's get back out on course here as we continue around. This is Greg van Avermaet, the Olympic champion, also having a stellar season this year, just as he finished it last year in Rio de Janeiro. Greg van Avermaet is not appearing amongst the leaders at the moment, but he must be very close to where they take that check. Simon Yates, British rider, gone through there, Paul. Not too bad for him, 20 seconds off the pace.
Well, there's two races, if you like, going on here today, Phil. There's riders who are trying to win this first individual race, and then there are riders like Alberto Contador who will be approaching this individual time trial to make sure he doesn't lose too much time going forward into this first week of the Tour de France this year.
Yes, he's been a good time trialist in the past on the occasion.
In fact, if you cast your mind back, Alberto Contador won himself a time trial in the Tour de France, and that was around the city of Annecy. This is Philippe Gilbert, or as they say in Belgium, they call him Phil Gilles these days.
Fills you. Well, he's 400 metres to go as he comes up the home straight here. Gilbert looks as though he's caught Uri Sagan, the brother of Peter, and gone by him on the race. He's just in the backdrop there, so he's given it a good shot here this time. As Gilbert races up, 20 Grand Tours for him as well now. He started his 20th today. Keeps looking up at that finishing clock. We haven't got any peg on him, but he's not challenged that. He was in only 10th place, 13 seconds off at the 8-kilometre check. And it looks as though he's just about hanging on. So he's come back pretty well because he's slotted in 10th place. So he's held his check time and converted that to a finished 10th. Now, the man that surprised us all and celebrated after winning the time trial stage of the Giro d'Italia. I can tell you, our Dutch friend in commentary here said he hasn't stopped celebrating since. Let's hope he's got his form back.
Yes, well, talking to the Dutch commentators, they reckon he was so happy with his victory in the final individual time trial of the Giro d'Italia. He did celebrate maybe a little bit too much, and he could be coming into the Tour de France just a little bit tired from those celebrations.
Check in on the progress of Romain Bardet here. Just wants to do a respectable time today to keep him up amongst the men he thinks can beat him in the mountains, or maybe he can beat them. We've got no significant information on him at the moment out on course. But this is the Frenchman who carries the hopes of France, quite frankly. The French, over the years, have had the most participants in the Tour de France, and they've got the most participants in this year's event. They've got 39 riders in this year's race. Italy come a far second with only 18.
Well, I give a 9 out of 10 for difficulty there at the speed that Romain Bardet went around that corner.
Yeah, he did go well, I agree.
This is Simon Yates.
Simon Yates, seen amongst his Orica Scott team as a possible co-leader at the moment with the newcomer from Colombia, Esteban Chavez. He was 20 seconds down at the check, which is very, very respectable. Simon Yates from Great Britain was always ridden on foreign teams, and this is an Australian team he's got now, and he could be one of the men battling out the rookie jersey, the best white jersey, under 25 years of age. Yates gives this his best shot. Has he made any improvement on the way back? They don't seem to be building on the check times as they come towards the finish because the wind changes direction a little bit. 50 metres to go for Simon Yates. 16:41 his time on the line. So he's 30 seconds off the pace. He'll slot in around 15th. In fact, he's come in at 16th, 30 seconds down.
This is Tony Galopin. He says he's going into the Tour de France a little bit into the unknown. It's a team that's been together for quite some time, and it's always rather strange to see a Frenchman expatriate himself to go to a foreign team, and even more difficult to go to a Belgian team. But when I talked to the team before the start, they said that we've been together for so long, we don't really need to have a team captain on the road. We all know our jobs when it comes down to the final few kilometres. So he'll be part of the riders looking after Andre Greipel, and he'll also be given a free hand on some of the stages deemed sort of average mountain stages.
Tony Galopin and his great moments in the Tour de France. As we move back out on course again, jumping all over the place here at the moment. This is, well, it should be Rigoberto Urán out on course. It is Rigoberto. We didn't see him start, did we? So this is Rigoberto Urán, another man who's amongst the favourites for long-term prospects.
He's one of those riders from Colombia that we've always promised to do well in the overall standings of the Grand Tours like this, but he's never yet finally managed to put a great 3-week race together. But who knows, maybe this interesting route that we've got for the Tour de France this year could suit the capabilities of this rider.
4th Tour for him. He wore the white jersey for 4 days back in 2011, but his best finish was that year, actually, when he finished 24th overall. But, of course, a couple of years older now, 6, in fact.
So I'm just getting a time check through the first time check. Another Sky rider has gone through with a pretty phenomenal time at the first time check. We got Kwiatkowski, Kirienka, and now Geraint Thomas has gone through just 3 seconds adrift at the first time check.
The 3 best times at the 8-kilometre check are now all held by Sky riders. Kwiatkowski is the best time at 9 minutes 20. Same time bottom 100th of a second for Kirienka, and Thomas goes through just 3 seconds off the pace. Well, what he said before the start may have inspired him. Let's get on with it, and we'll see what he can come home. Nobody seems to be coming home that much quicker. We'll see. Still out on course here with the Olympic champion Greg van Avermaet, and he's had a winning year already this year. This is Jakob Fuglsang here, who will really want to deliver a good time because of the favourites. This is the first real favourite to lay down an established time for the others to follow. But look at the clock.
Well, he's losing a big chunk of time, Phil, and this is probably not the amount of time that he wanted to lose on day one. He came in with a lot of confidence, and it's always a bad sign when you see just how many riders are ticking by. He's going to finish outside of the top 30. It's not the position that's important to Fuglsang here when he comes up to the line. It's the time that he's going to lose. He stops the clock there, and he's lost himself close to 40 seconds, or maybe a little bit more, 47, if I calculate quickly.
Yeah, only 43rd of the riders who started with his favourites are still to go here. Jakob Fuglsang will not be happy with that at the moment, and it could be a combination of the weather and possibly nerves, because he knows this year for him could be his Tour de France. Here he comes, the Olympic champion Greg van Avermaet, free to ride for himself today, but will he ride for the team for the rest of the Tour? Only time will tell.
He's also tried, Phil, and this is another thing, is he here for the team? Is he here for Richie Porte? He's also tried to do a pretty respectable time in the individual time trial here, because I think in the back of his mind he's also dreaming about the possibility of a yellow jersey for him by the time we get down to stage 3 and the finish up to the summit in Longwy. 35 seconds adrift for Greg van Avermaet.
Well, he won't finish in the top 30 in the time trial. He's 25th at the moment. BMC rider comes in. Now, the next man to start is Esteban Chavez of Colombia. We're with Romain Bardet out on course at the moment. And I'm just checking down the list here with Bardet, but I don't see him at all in the standings at the 8-kilometer check, which is not good, I'm afraid, because there's 19 seconds is all that comes up. Top 20. And there he is, Esteban Chavez, a really super character. Now it's his crack at his first Tour de France.
Had a perfect start to the year with second place in the Santos Tour Down Under. Then he rode the Herald Sun Tour. Went back to Colombia to prepare for the national championships. And ouch, all of a sudden he developed a knee injury. And he's fought his way back to get ready for the Tour de France since then.
One of the most jovial characters on the circuit. 27 years of age. His only performance of note this year is his second place in the Tour Down Under. Of course, he was taken there by his Australian team. We've guarded him. He's been a stage winner, and he's finished second in the Giro d'Italia. He's had a third-place finish in the Vuelta. And what's going on here?
I'm just looking at the shorts there on the left-hand side for Tony Galopin, Phil. You can just see that they are a little bit ripped up.
I think we can show you it. Let's have a look. It's on this left-hand bend. Just leaning too far into that barrier, and again the white line claims a rider.
The problem is, if you go into a corner like this in these wet conditions and you have to change your line going around the corner, there is no way to correct especially on these very stiff and rigid time trial bikes, and that's why he went down. You can see how badly ripped up he was.
He is, but no real mark coming through there, which indicates that this water is forming a skid pan on the top and causing an aquaplaning effect. So let's have a look again, but just can't control the fall at all once they hit the deck.
Watch this, partway around the corner, he tries to change a fraction, and then he realizes he's going too fast. It's just before the white line as he tries to lean over a little bit more.
The line causes the acceleration, though, once he's on it. Now let's go and join Romain Bardet coming up towards the finishing line. I don't think it's going to be great news out there, and it certainly isn't. 16:11 best time, and now it's going to go ahead towards over 16:30 as Bardet races the last couple of 100 meters to the line. It all depends, of course, what those behind him do, because they're the men he will challenge later on as we unwind this Tour de France across Belgium and into France and up to the finish in Paris. A 3-week journey indeed. So don't give up now, that's for sure. comes up towards the line, 39th. Oh, he's outside the top 42nd with time 44 seconds off the pace set by Vasil Kirienka.
There's Geraint Thomas coming in all of a sudden out of nowhere. There he is.
And he's gone in with the best time. 60 minutes, 4 seconds. He was using Bardet as his target, and he's drawn him to that finishing line. Team Sky have now got first and second and fourth in the stage at the moment. But Geraint Thomas, 60 minutes and 4 seconds, and he was 3 seconds off the best time at the midway check.
Well, he said on Twitter this morning, Phil, after watching a rugby match in New Zealand, the British and Irish Lions against the All Blacks, that gave him motivation. Well, certainly he's come up with a phenomenal time. I think we found a new way to prepare for an individual time trial like this. Watch a rugby match first.
Well, that is a superb performance by Geraint Thomas. He is such a popular bike rider, often lets his legs do the talking, stays out of the politics of the team. Although he is the only one that seems to talk to the journalists and give them the inside information. And Geraint Thomas off to a great start. Will it survive to give him a yellow jersey? He's a Welshman. Got married a couple of years ago. Let's see how he goes. Well, these are the corners. He's very sharp. Right angle bends. Let's go to the start house. Richie Porte. Chris Froome tips him as the favourite to win the Tour de France. I wonder. Got worked over in the Criterium du Dauphiné on the very last day and lost his lead to finish in second place. 20 seconds.
Well, he's with a team, Phil, that he feels for the first time have given him complete confidence to support him in a 3-week Grand Tour like this.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop.
So Porte is underway, quickly into his rhythm. He knows how every second will count if he is to win his first Tour de France. He can't afford to lose time on this course. He will have to take risks.
I just remember, Phil, talking to him early on this year at the Santos Tour Down Under, just how confident he appeared to be. And he went on and he stamped his authority all over that race. And every point that he's come out to race this year, he has produced a good performance. Yes, he might not have won the Criterium du Dauphiné, but he was on form, and he, I think, maybe made a couple of tactical mistakes, as did the team. But the indications are that this man has the form, and he's presented the form at every rendezvous that he's been at throughout this season.
4, 3, 2, 1, stop.
The Dutchman, Bauke Mollema, underway. Another man who can do a great ride on his day.
But his job in the Tour de France this year is to look after Alberto Contador.
And he said that's what he'll do, but he's well capable of making the podium in Paris. So if he stays close to Contador, who knows where he'll finish up. As Bauke Mollema heads off down the course, let's go to the start house. Alejandro Valverde, the teammate of Nairo Quintana. He says he'll ride for Nairo. I tell you, this man can win the Tour de France.
What a brilliant season he's had at 37 years of age. I would say probably his best.
Absolutely. He's more consistent than ever. Inside 10.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop.
I would say, Phil, when you think about a rider like Nairo Quintana going into the mountain stages, to have a lieutenant alongside you like Alejandro Valverde, what a boost for the morale on the big, important stages that must be.
Bauke Mollema out on course. Well, the crowd has survived something like 6 hours out there today in rather dull conditions, but just look at the crowd. As far as the eye can see, the Germans have taken this race to heart, starting a grand départ of the Tour de France for the first time on German soil in 30 years. Rigoberto Urán, how's he doing? It's not a bad time. He needs to be inside 17, I think, to make it look respectable. He's going to be outside of that. So Rigoberto Urán will have to wait and see how it stands up against the other contenders for final victory. Only 69th for him, conceding over a minute to Geraint Thomas.
That's a big chunk of time to lose, Phil, in just the first 14 kilometres of a 3,500-kilometre bike race. And that's why it is so important as we start to get down to the big names who are coming into the starting houses right now.
Let's go back out on course again. Josh van Emden. Well, he's the next one to come through. Now, he's gone through the 8K check in 9th place, looking for 8 seconds, but I think those legs might be a little bit jaded after his incredible effort on the final day of the Giro d'Italia. Lilian Calmajan. Another man in his first Tour de France. Comes over in 45th place. And now the arrival of Van Emden. It's not going to be a race-leading time, this one, and this is a good scalp as far as Geraint Thomas is concerned as he watches on from the hot seat. The time to beat has long since gone now, some 10 seconds, more than that, 15 seconds and 5th place. So he did well, Paul. He picked up on the return.
Yes, he did, but he was using a massive gear there, and he just wasn't able to lift it in the second part of that race. I think, as the Dutch commentators mentioned to us, that he maybe started this race just a little bit tired. This is the national champion of the time trial from Norway, Edvald Boasson.
Yes, the man that's made that title pretty much his own over the years, Boasson. And since the special, it's the 9th time this year he won the national time trial championship of his country. As we go out to catch up with Richie Porte now, the public here will know this Australian, and he responds to the action. He comes from Tasmania, which I always say is the little island off the big island of Australia. And the Tasmanian people are so much into their athletes. They produce great athletes, yet it's a very small island. But the sport's crazy down there. So, as we are watching Richie Porte, we can't see him, but he's just behind him. Let's go to Steve Perino.
Well, Phil, we are just crossing the bridge now. It's turned to a crosswind. Porte, in the turns coming into this, I would say took a cautious approach. I don't think he's willing to give it all away for a second or two. Now, you know how well he's been time trialing this year, so I figured I'd go talk to the man that might be behind it. His name is Jürgen Landries. He's the man in charge of only TT bikes. I figured there might be something technical. Maybe it's the bike, the tires, the skin suit, something like that. He said absolutely not. What has been the difference this year with Richie Porte is he's finally beginning to believe he is no longer a helper, a man who helps Chris Froome climb the mountains. He is a man on a mission to be the first one up the mountain and at the end of the Tour de France. And that belief alone, he thinks, has made that little difference that's made him so good so far this year.
If Richie believes in himself, he can do it. We've just got to see that belief come through over the next 3 weeks. I know Australia is pinning all their hopes on him to become only the second man from Australia to win the Tour de France. As we stay on course here with Alexander Kristoff, a sprinter who is hoping, and he told us in the hotel yesterday, we happened to stay in the same hotel as Alexander yesterday, and he said, we said, have a good tour, Alexander. He said, I just hope I get the results.
Well, that's what he's looking for, but one result that his team, Katusha Alpecin, might be looking for this afternoon is the man who's going to start at 20 minutes past 6 o'clock, so not too far away from us, and that is the World Time Trial champion, Tony Martin.
Out with Bauke Mollema again now. He's had a top 6 finish in the Tour de France in the past. He's now declared he's going to work for his teammate, Contador. These are tricky bends in the rain. They're just not going away. The water, if anything, is getting more. It's not torrential rain, but it's very, very wetting.
I think, no, Phil, the big advantage, I was thinking about the weather conditions, but this man is the man we're expecting to see do a good performance. He was 4th on 2 occasions in the Olympic Games in London, in the individual time trial and in the road race. Taylor Phinney. from Boulder, Colorado.
Well, he started out life being a world junior pursuit champion. He went on to be a world under-23 time trial champion. He's done it all. He finally gets a shot at his first Tour de France. His father was here 30 years ago. His father won 2 stages, Davis, in the Tour de France. Very proud man today because his mum, Connie Carpenter, she was the first woman to win a gold medal in the Olympic Games in Los Angeles in 1984. Davis is the next generation up the road, and he's now underway. Sorry, Taylor's the next generation. I can see Davis laughing back home in Boulder.
Well, the rider we're looking at now, Phil, is about to start his 17th Tour de France. He's been a time trial champion in France. He's been the road champion. He's worn the yellow jersey. Sylvain Chavanel.
And see the rain coming down here. He joins the record holders this year, his 17th Tour de France. He joins our own Jens Voigt. 20 seconds for Sylvain. 22 Grand Tours, starting with this one today. Or ending with this one today so far.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop.
Against the backdrop of his Direct Energy jersey there, you could see the rain coming down. After 22 Grand Tours, there's no surprises for Sylvain Chavanel. And he is a very good time trialist as well. Quick glimpse out on course there of Richie Porte. We're waiting to see his time going through the check. We're now with Alejandro Valverde. He's behind Porte and heading for that first 8-kilometer check. Again, we also had the privilege of staying in the same hotel as Valverde yesterday, and of course he was endlessly on radio for the journalists around Spain. He's a very popular personage in his home country. And this is the man with a great story which we're going to tell you in a moment. This is Primož Roglič, who has come to the sport. This is his first Grand Tour, and he's in the Tour de France, and he could win today.
In fact, it's his first Tour de France. He rode the Giro d'Italia last year, Phil, and he was second in the prologue time trial, and he was also a winner of an individual time trial in that event. It was back in 2007, though, when he was ski jumping, that he had this dramatic crash in front of a home crowd.
Well, that was the sport I used to commentate on. Those are very brave men, but that was a long way down for Roglič on that occasion, and he didn't really progress in the sport much after this. The wise man decided, after surviving this, he would go and take up cycling. This is Valverde. This is Valverde. The bike is there. Oh, dear me. Now, Valverde is not jumping up like the other riders did. Let's hope he's okay. Goodness me. Well, everybody's worried about the riders who may be coming round that corner, but Valverde is in trouble here.
Well, Phil, just looking there, it's taken a long time for Alejandro Valverde to get himself up from that accident.
I don't know if we've got pictures of how he fell there, but if we have, we'll find them for you. But we're back up with Richie Porte here at the moment. And we've got no signs of Porte having gone through it 8 kilometres. I haven't worked out exactly where that check. Here we are. Let's have a look at this. Valverde on the corner, the one that's caught so many riders out.
Once you lose the front wheel, though, you just saw him. Oh, that was a hard bang against the barriers there.
Yes.
But you just saw him lose the front wheel a little bit. And once you lose the front wheel in a moment like this, anybody who rides a bike in these conditions knows that it's impossible to correct.
Unlike all the others, Paul, the bike didn't take the strain this time. Valverde left his bike and hit the barriers himself. Just see this. Most have gone in behind the bicycle, but not this time. It's a long slide.
That was hard.
Yeah, he's taking it full frontal there too. Well, we can only hope here that Valverde is going to continue his Tour de France. Let's go back up with Richie Porte. I don't know where he is on course, but he's not appearing on the checkpoint yet at 8 kilometres. And we understand it's 4 kilometres to go, so he's not appeared in the top 20 riders on the 8-kilometre check. Now, all the riders on that top 20 are not men were looking for the final victory in the Tour.
But as Steve Perino told us, Phil, behind Richie Porte, that he wasn't taking too many risks going around those corners. You've got 8.7 miles of racing today, and like Alejandro Valverde, he was pushing it going into those corners. You do that, you come unstuck, and your whole Tour de France can get thrown out of the window right on day one.
Well, we've no update on Valverde. We will, of course, bring it to you if we hear anything. Just leaving the start house now. You can't see him, but I can tell you was Andre Greipel. Every time he's ridden the Tour de France, he's won at least one stage. Let's see what happens now, because let's remind you, he is a German. This is out on course. We're waiting for Tony Martin, and there he is. He's about to take the start. He goes out a minute behind Greipel. He's chosen to start 13th from the end, so I presume he's not superstitious. He starts his Grand Tour for the 14th time. At 32 years of age, he feels all of the pressure of what he is, a world time trial champion.
15 seconds away.
10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
As Tony said, the pleasure of riding on German soil at the start of the Tour de France, because he wasn't around. He was only 2 years old last time the race came to start in Germany. He's 4 times the world individual time trial champion and the current leader of that championship. 4 stage wins in the Tour de France between 2011 and 2014. And he's also had a stage win and 3 yellow jerseys in the 2015 Tour de France before he crashed out on stage 6 with a broken collarbone. He abandoned stage 21 due to knee pain in last year's Tour de France. He's known all of the emotions of this event, but none like today if he's to win this time trial. On German soil, as a world champion, it doesn't get better than that, Paul.
But just think about the pressure, huge pressure. 4 times world time trial champion, a special jersey on his back. Just a week ago, he won the German national time trial championships for the 7th time. And I think he'd throw most of that out of the window, Phil, to win here today.
You bet your life. He came here just after that championship, straight into Düsseldorf. It's over an hour's plane journey for him from the Berlin region. So he came here, and he's been here ever since. He's been quietly riding this time trial course when the cars weren't on it, late at night, working it out, deciding every corner. Now the rain has come. How will that affect him? The face of Marcel Kittel, another German rider who tomorrow hopes to continue any German successes by winning the first road race stage. But it will be on Belgian soil as the race goes to Liège tomorrow.
10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, stop.
And you know what? We always regard this man, Phil, as a sprinter. Yes, he's won 9 stages at the Tour de France in the sprint, but he's been a 2-time world champion. This is Richie Porte in the finishing straight.
And I can tell you his time's not going to rival anybody on the leaderboard here. 16:04 Thomas has long since gone by. Richie Porte, perhaps wisely, has respected the rain on the course here and has ridden with caution, because his time is slipping away. He's well outside the top 20 by the time he does come to the line. You wouldn't think so now, looking at his face, though, would you? He slips up to those gears to try and race towards the line. It could be every second counts. Remember, his arch rival, Chris Froome, is still to come. So too Quintana, so too Contador, so too Aru. And so as Richie comes up to the line, he slips away, just gets inside the top 40, oh no he doesn't, 40th place finish for Richie Porte.
But he's lost himself at 47 seconds on the current leader there, Geraint Thomas.
Yeah. Well, the men who could rival Richie Porte as we go through the next 3 weeks, here they are, they're still to go. Alberto Contador, 2009's individual time trial champion. Nairo Quintana, who loves the public and loves to race well. 3rd career Tour de France appearance. He's always podiumed. Chris Froome in his new colours on Team Sky, the defending champion. He will start last of the 198 riders. We're back on Tony Martin here. He's going under a bridge there. That's why the cameras have stopped working. Now we'll get back into the satellite, and there we are. These are live pictures from Dortmund as we get to the closing stage of the time trial. Chris Froome is now heading out to the start house to do his 14-kilometre test. That's 8.7 miles. And while we're watching these pictures, especially of the world champion, the big favourite for Germany today, Tony Martin, I can tell you that Taylor Phinney has gone through the check in 4th place, but only 3 seconds off the best time of Kwiatkowski, and in the same time as the current leader at the finish line, Geraint Thomas.
That is a pretty amazing performance. This is Fabio Aru, the Italian champion, but also a man looking to try and ride onto the podium here in France.
His second at Tour de France, 13th last time, a great result. He could do better than that, at least that's what he'll tell you as he starts his quest today. So Aru goes out of the start house. There are only 5 riders left to go. And of those 5 riders, 3 are favourites to ride to the top in this year's Tour de France. This is the tricky corner again. Well, we've seen Alejandro Valverde crash. We didn't see him get back on his bike, and we can't find out anything on him at the moment. This is Stefan Kung of Team BMC, and he is a possible winner today.
Well, he is the national time trial championships, and the team have said he's the best time trialist outside of Rowan Dennis on their squad.
Proudly carrying the champion of Switzerland on his racing jersey, because national champions carry the flag of their country as part of their design. But he's very much Team BMC, the same as Richie Porte, who we've seen finish. Going into the start house, Alberto Contador.
Well, Phil, I'm getting information from Radio Tour. They're saying that Alejandro Valverde has actually pulled out of the Tour de France as we look at Alberto Contador climbing into the starting house.
Well, that is exceptionally sad. That news is confirmed. Valverde out of the Tour in the prologue time trial, and of course a valuable man to ride alongside Quintana, who will be the next rider to start, and he will know that that situation exists behind Alberto Contador.
10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top.
And while we're watching Contador go, let me remind you that the Daytona Xfinity race is on CNBC right now if you want to watch that. And let me remind you there are only 3 riders left to start in this time trial here. And Geraint Thomas is still the leader. His time is 16 minutes 4. Quintana going in. Does he or does he not know that Valverde may be out of the Tour de France? His right-hand man for the next 3 weeks.
As always, Phil, Nairo Quintana not showing any emotion at all on his face. Here's the arrival of Taylor Phinney.
Well, let's see how he's going, because he was only 3 seconds off the lead at the check. If he's kept this pace up, he was level with Geraint Thomas at the check. Same time, Geraint Thomas is in with 16:04. Put the clock on the screen as soon as we can. There it is. Oh, he's got 4 seconds. He's not going to do the 4 seconds. Taylor Phinney has slowed a little bit on this run up to the line, but nonetheless, Phinney has given this his best shot in his first Tour de France. He's going to have a high finish at the moment as he comes up towards the line for Cannondale Drapac. A nice sprint by Davis Phinney, recovering from that terrible accident. 9th place just now.
I think you meant Taylor Phinney, and you know what? Taylor Phinney always rises, Phil, to the big occasions. That was an impressive performance, 5th best time, but Tony Martin has just gone through that first time check with the best time, 1 second faster than Michael Kwiatkowski.
Tony Martin, the world champion, the man from Germany, has gone through. Best time, 9 minutes, 19 seconds. There is his four. Kwiatkowski a second back. Kirienko 1 second back. Thomas in fourth place. Thomas is in first place at the finish, though, with 16.04. Oh, another slip of gears by a man leading the start house. And this was Nairo Quintana, but he's into his rhythm.
These riders, Phil, are also nervous when it comes into this start. This is Tony Martin. We've got the time check at the first instance. He's a second faster than Kwiatkowski and Kirienka and 4 seconds faster than Geraint Thomas.
Well, he took it nice and gently. He's learned this course inside out over a week. He's been here a week, learning every crack in the concrete.
I'm sorry to say, Phil, I'm looking now at the Movistar, the team of Alejandro Valverde's Twitter site, and they are saying that Alejandro Valverde has been taken away to hospital. As we look here at Sylvain Chavanel.
17 times a Tour rider now, Sylvain Chavanel, a multi-time trial champion of France over the years. It's another respectable ride by this man as he races towards the end of a career. And he's coming in with a very, very good time as well. 45th at the moment.
4, 3, 2, 1.
The shadow boxing is over. Now you must deliver. Chris Froome, the 3-time champion of the Tour, last to go. He goes out of the start house knowing he's got 2 teammates, best time at the other end of the course.
And let's not forget that he's driven around the course in his team car behind one of those teammates, and that was Michael Kwiatkowski. But he knows the dangers of this road. I'm sure everybody has given the feedback to him that these corners can be extremely treacherous.
They can, and over the years gone by, Chris has not shown to be the best bike handler in these conditions either. He crashed out on stage 5 a few years ago now in the Tour de France when it was over the cobblestones. Last man to go of the 198. It appears now that we only have 197 riders in this race. The conditions claiming Alejandro Valverde. According to his team website, they've taken him to hospital. Froome is underway. For the 7th time he takes part in the Tour de France. On 3 occasions he's won it. Settles in quickly, no risk required. He will know what Richie Porter's done, the man he regards, his words, as the favourite to win the Tour, not him. So he knows now he hasn't got to perhaps take the real risks that he may have thought he had to before Port finished. This is the man. Is he going to do it? Tony Martin, best time by a single second at the checkpoint. Is he going to keep the rhythm right up to the finishing line and be crowned the winner of this time trial? Because I don't think there's anybody behind him will beat him. As we continue to switch around at the moment, looking here at Aru. As we go back, Michael Matthews, face grimacing. He's a very good time trialist, Michael Matthews, but he's not showing up on the leaderboard. He's down in 14th place, 10 seconds off the time of Martin at the check. See how he's come back up towards his finishing line here. He's a sprinter. Not a complete sprinter, though, but we'll see how he unwinds tomorrow as he goes in 17.18 and he drops in 11th place.
No, I think that was the time of the rider before. In fact, 16.21 is what Race Radio is just saying.
OK. Well, they've dropped him in 20 seconds off the place with 11th place off Geraint Thomas. This is still Tony Martin.
In the past, whenever I've looked at Tony Martin in an individual time trial, I've thought that his pedaling cadence was so slow because he's using a monster gear. But you look at the pedaling cadence that he's got here, Phil, these high pedaling cadence, around about 100 revolutions a minute. There is the 1 kilometer banner, so theoretically, he should be at the finishing line in around about 1 minute and 5 seconds at speeds like this.
In the years gone by, he's won 3 time trials in the Tour de France, but he's never won one in Germany because he's never raced here in a time trial before in Germany. And this is the one he really wants. The Grand Depart of the Tour de France on German soil for the first time in 30 years. He's only dreamt of winning this as the world champion on his home territory. And so far, so good.
Well, it's going to be very, very close. I didn't get a check of the time at the 1 kilometer banner exactly. The time of Geraint Thomas is 16.04.
We're going to know now because he's running into the last 300 metres of the race. When we get the head-on shot, the clock should come into view. The time he's aiming at, 16 minutes and 4 seconds. Somewhere amongst the car headlights. It gets quite dark here in Düsseldorf right now. Tony Martin, the world champion, is he going to deliver? He's got just 3 seconds to get there. Geraint Thomas is still on the leaderboard. Tony Martin's dream is not going to come true. Again, like so many, he struggled on the second half of the course. Tony Martin slots in to 3rd place. Geraint Thomas, a quick glimpse here and there, must be thinking, is he going to win? Is he become the first ever Welsh cyclist to wear the maillot jaune of a Tour de France?
I have to think, Phil, of the next riders to come. The only rider I can believe might really challenge him is the BMC rider, Stefan Kung.
Yes, totally agree. I don't think Chris Froome can get up to that sort of level, even if he was a few years ago in London in 2012, a bronze medalist in the time trial Olympic Games. Kicks out of that corner. Not looking quite as frisky, I don't think. I think he knows the fact that the big men he worries about, they're not also taking risks today. One of his big rivals, Valverde, looks to be out of it altogether as well.
As Froome, Phil, does not need to take any risks in this opening 14-kilometre individual time trial. He knows, as he's got his teammate sitting in the hot seat, Geraint Thomas. He's got to be
his heart
there
must
with
be beating
breath.
over 200 beats right now with no effort at all, because he's hyped. He knows that only one man can really beat him, and you're right, Stefan Kung.
Well, Tony Martin has in fact slipped into 3rd place at the finish line, even behind Vasil Kirienka. So currently Team Sky are sitting with 1st and 2nd place in the finishing gate.
Well, the world champion will be desperately disappointed that, because it's quite possible the man that wins the time trial today, looking at the standings at the moment, could lead this race for a few days. This is Quintana crossing the Rhine again. This is the rival of Marcel Kittel. And it's not a bad ride by Kittel. You're right, Paul. He's a pretty good time trialist, he really wants to be.
And his goal as well is to ride a good individual time trial today, not lose too much time, with the dream of possibly getting time bonuses in the first couple of days to hold on to the yellow jersey. But stage 3 might be too hard for him. That's a good performance by a man regarded as a sprinter, 9th place.
16 seconds off Geraint Thomas. Remember, for the sprinters, there's bonuses out on the course, out on the finish line as well, so he could make that up in a couple of days, if it's to be Geraint Thomas, the new leader of the Tour. Stefan Kung has gone through 1 second, the 3rd best time, and ahead of Geraint Thomas by 3 seconds at the check. So that's going down to the line now. Now, all the riders coming home are losing much more than 3 seconds on the return. But Stefan Kung might be different.
Well, as Jim Okovic said to us before the start, Phil, take out Rowan Dennis from the equation. Stefan Kung is the best time trialist that their team has got.
Looking at the number 1, the rider who wears that number again in a Tour de France, Stefan. Now we've gone to Stefan Kung. Here he is. Is he going to spoil it for Wales and for Geraint Thomas and for Sky? Because he's, at the moment, about 3 seconds quicker than Geraint Thomas.
And, of course, he's a rider who has a pedigree of speed. He's been a world champion on the track in the individual pursuit. Tony Martin was the fastest pointer to that first time check. But Stefan Kung there, Phil, as you said, has moved into 3rd place. And look at that, 3 riders in exactly the same time almost, 2nd, 3rd and 4th at that point.
Crossing the Rhine again, the lonely figure in the white jersey of Chris Froome. Quintana's gone through that check, we think, in 9 minutes 46, so he's 27 seconds off the best time there. I think that's to be expected, quite honestly. This is the man, though, who could spoil the party for Team Sky today, Stefan Kung. He is the national time trial champion of Switzerland. He's had his big moments in sport, he's had his down moments. He crashed in the National Time Trial Championship last year and broke his collarbone and his iliac bone. He came back and won the time trial title this time around. Now, is he going to win the opening day of the Tour de France? This is Quintana. Steady as you go.
You know, it's really tough when you're a man designated as a climber in the team here, because these stages require, if you like, what the cyclists call having a big, a little bit of a speedo slide round that corner. That you have to have a big engine. You have to have lots of power on a course like this.
Quintana slips through the gears when he gets on what is now a safe straight road here, and tries to get back up to speed. No idea what this man is doing, which is Chris Froome's legs we're looking at. Froome has got nothing visible on the board. I don't know where he is out on course. This is Latour. We haven't seen him before as he comes through. Oh, sorry, it's Arnaud Demar, his teammate. Arnaud Demar coming through here at the moment. Latour was the penultimate rider to start. We haven't seen him at all for AG2R.
This is one of the riders we'll talk about over the flatter stages of the Tour de France. He's the recently titled champion of France. Well, Chris Froome, Phil, has gone through the first time check just 9 seconds adrift, in 12th place at the moment. Yeah. So that's a very respectable performance by the defending champion.
I put it down as absolutely amazing. That's a terrific performance. Demar finishes 16:53, 55th position. That time of Chris Froome, Paul, is superb in these conditions, because that's going to stun his rivals.
Well, for the moment, he's the best of all of the overall contenders. The riders all around him are great individual time trialists. Castroviejo, Marcel Kittel, Andrei Grivko.
Well, let's go quickly inside the race. Steve Perino. Steve.
Well, I can tell you that Chris Froome seems to be taking a little more risk, certainly, than Richie Porte through some of these turns. And I talked to him after I interviewed him off camera, and he said, you know, the one thing I have not done all year long is really work on my time trialing until the last 3 weeks. He said in the last 3 weeks, I've sharpened it up. So don't go based on past performances this year. I'm ready to go.
Well, he's certainly stepping up to the plate today, that's for sure. If he gets the best time of the projected favourites for this Tour, that is psychologically a big blow to them, because they thought Chris Froome might be a little bit suspect this time around. He continues to be on the spotlight here in Düsseldorf. The man who could be taking this race out is Stefan Kung of Switzerland, and the man who's leading it at the minute is Geraint Thomas, the Welshman, on Team Sky, the same team as Chris Froome. Through the S's nicely there.
I'm amazed, Phil, that really the man who is looking to win this race after 3 weeks is actually prepared to take risks in these corners. But that's the kind of guy that Chris Froome has proved to us to be over the last couple of years. Many people have said, oh, he's just too predictable. But I'll tell you one thing, last year in the Tour de France, he was not predictable. And he's probably the rider who's got the most confidence going into this race.
Well, this is Fabio Aru coming in. He started a minute ahead of Stefan Kung, who can't be far behind him, I wouldn't think. But it's been a pretty fighting ride here by Fabio Aru. Top 30 at the moment, conceding a little bit of time to the leaderboard. And I think if the camera pulls back, you know, we could well see Kunga back in the straight. There he is, right behind him, taking about 50 seconds out of that minute there as Aru crosses the line. Is this the man who is going to rewrite the leaderboard with really nobody left to challenge him? Stefan Kung of Team BMC hits the line, 16:09. He's gone down. He slips behind Geraint Thomas, who surely now will become the first ever Welshman to lead the Tour de France. Like all of the riders, Paul, they found the return too difficult. Look at this. Oh, he breathes a sigh of relief.
Because he knew that probably his greatest challenge in the last 10 to 15 riders was Stefan Kung, who just slips into second place, and he is 5 seconds adrift. Back with Nairo Quintana.
Yes, and judging by the checks at 8 kilometres, there is nobody left in this race that can run up to Thomas now. He can start to think big and dream of what might be. This is Nairo Quintana, not interested in winning the time trial, but very interested in making sure he finishes close to this rider, Chris Froome.
Froome has got into his time trialing position. He's been out on the bike for just over 13 minutes. That puts him around about 3 minutes or so away from the finish line. I'm amazed by this extremely high cadence that he's still able to produce in these very cold weather conditions. But maybe more, Phil, the fact that he's prepared on course like this to take risks going into those corners, because he knows today it's a big opportunity to get chance and get time over his rivals like Nairo Quintana and Richie Porte of Australia.
Here comes Alberto Contador, the man of the mountains, but he's done some great time trials in his career, but now he's not thinking of winning this one. He wants to stay close to Froome and Quintana as they go out onto the open roads tomorrow towards Belgium. The time of Thomas, 16:04, has well sailed by now. Contador comes up the home straight in the rain here in Düsseldorf, and he finishes with a time of 16:58 and drops in 67th place of the 195 riders that have finished.
And that's almost a minute behind Geraint Thomas, 54 seconds to be exact, and he will be losing time to a lot of his other rivals with hopes of finishing high in this Tour de France overall, as we look now on the concentrated face of Nairo Quintana of Colombia and Movistar.
Well, I'll tell you what, he's beaten Alberto Contador because he started a minute behind him. There's no minute gone by yet. As the clock continues to count, he's going to gain a little bit over the Spaniard as the Colombian races up towards the finish. 16:39, 16:40, and still to come one rider that really doesn't matter. Great respect to Pierre-Roger Latour, and then Froome will be in. As Nairo Quintana and the flags of Colombia salute him, hits the line. Little bit of a gain there on Alberto Contador.
Well, 16 minutes and 52. One thing he's not short of, Phil, that's a lot of Colombian supporters on the route to the door. Here's the French national time trial champion, Pierre Latour.
First we've seen of him, Pierre Latour. He got to start second from the end because of his title. He rides for Team AG2R, won his first national championship just a week ago. What a privilege for this young Frenchman here to ride a pretty good time trial too as he races up towards the line. He's beaten the two that just finished in front of him, 17th place, and that leaves just the Tour champion defending to come home. Chris Froome on course. Has he closed in?
Well, he went through that time check, the first time check in 12th place, looking for 9 seconds, and here he is cruising into the finishing straight.
Well, he's closed in on Latour, so he's in for a top 10 finish here, Chris Froome, and that sends the message to all of the other leaders or projected leaders of this Tour de France. Geraint Thomas, 16:04. He's not going to be far behind Geraint, but I don't think he's going to steal the show, and the answer is no. Thomas wins the stage, and Froome wins the psychological battle over all of his rivals in this year's Tour de France. As Froome races to the line here, this is a result for him. He crosses it in 6th place. There's the message, Paul. Chris Froome is looking to win his 4th Tour de France.
More importantly, that 12 seconds that he lost to Geraint Thomas is not what he was worried about. What he was concerned about was putting time between himself and this first rendezvous against all of his other rivals. And there's Geraint Thomas, and that's a big day.
But big day, it's a huge day. He's tried so hard to do this. He's in his 8th Tour de France. Geraint Thomas, such a modest guy. He's the quiet talker. This is how he did it.
And as well, let's not forget, Phil, although we're thinking about his performance in the time trial here today, he's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist.
Yeah, and for the moment, he's the reigning Commonwealth Games road race champion as well. Until next year, but he's already said he won't go to Australia to defend. Let's have a look at the first result of this year's Tour de France. Team Sky are all smiles. Geraint Thomas, the first Welshman ever to become the yellow jersey of the Tour de France, and only the 8th British rider to pull on a yellow jersey in the Tour de France. He wins. Stefan Kung comes very close, 5 seconds off the pace, and 3rd place with Vasily Kirienka. The big news is, though, Chris Froome, the 3-time winner of the Tour, concedes 12 seconds to men he really doesn't care about. He's ahead of all those he does care about, and they are quite a long way behind him, Paul.
Well, those are big chunks of time. All of these other riders will lose time once we get into the big mountains. Chris Froome today, he's reported present and correct.
The one big sadness, of course, is it seems to be the loss of Alejandro Valverde. And when we come back, we'll be bringing the podiums as usual, the interviews, the highlights. And Taylor Phinney will join us on set. And he should be very pleased with his first day out in his very first Tour de France. Well, there's the man to talk about tomorrow at least. the first Welshman to lead the Tour de France and only the 8th Englishman in history. Well done, Geraint Thomas. The Tour de France on NBC SN is brought to you by the all-new 2017 Jeep Compass. No matter your destination, there's a million beautiful, ever-changing ways to get you there. By Jelly Belly Sport Beans, clinically proven to improve sports performance. And by Giro Sport Design. Giro's new Pro Light Tech Lace is the only 150-gram shoe with Tour-level performance.
You are watching the Tour de France post-race report, presented by GMC.
There's the man who navigated the wet roads and also the wind best out of Team Sky, Geraint Thomas, with a time of 16:04 in the Stage 1 individual time trial. Good for a victory by 5 seconds. Team Sky claiming places 1st, 3rd, 6th, and 8th. And when you're in your 8th tour and that's your first stage win, that's how you react. Congratulations to Geraint Thomas. Thanks for coming back with us, Paul Burmeister, alongside Bob Roll and Christian Vande Velde. Somewhere between tricky and scary, that's what the roads were like on this 14-kilometer time trial. How did Geraint Thomas do it the best?
He paced himself better than anybody. He was a little bit slower than the very fastest at the first time check, but then he continued to build his momentum. Disappointing Giro d'Italia, where he was supposed to lead Team Sky. He crashed out of that and has obviously trained himself perfectly for today's event. And Team Sky, their attention to detail is better than anybody in the business. The right tire choice, the right tire pressure, the width of the tire, and the aerodynamics of the bicycle. And Geraint Thomas scorching the course. He took a little bit of perspective, 12 seconds out of Tony Martin in the last 5 kilometers, last 3 miles of the race, and that is massive. So his pacing at the end was the difference in winning. And now, first yellow jersey, first stage win. A great day for Geraint Thomas, and Team Sky was fabulous today.
Yeah, Team Sky, if you look at the top 8, you got 4 of the top 8, 50%. I mean,
crazy.
We hope they slow down just a tad and give a little bit more of cheese to the rest of the peloton before the week's over. But so far, so good for Team Sky. We've been saying that for years about Geraint Thomas, even saying as far as almost wish he was on a different team to see him actually going against Chris Froome, because he has so much potential, obviously. And this goes back to what we were saying this morning. How many people we have on Team Sky who could be contenders in their own right within the team working for Chris Froome?
He took his time, took advantage of his time to be the man in the spotlight. Rest of the time, he'll be supporting Chris Froome. There's a look at the top 5, 1 and 3 from Team Sky, and Team Sky will continue on to the second page, and Chris Froome shows up there. A very impressive performance for Chris Froome, all the way up at number 6. And Geraint Thomas is your winner, so of course he was popular. Everybody wanted to talk to him afterward, and here's what he had to say.
You'll be wearing the yellow jersey tomorrow. Can you believe it?
No. It's an amazing feeling. I didn't even think about it, to be honest. I was super relaxed coming here, and yeah, it's an amazing feeling. I didn't believe it was going to happen. Even, well, I thought, Martin's going to beat me, or so-and-so's going to, somebody's going to beat me. So, but amazing feeling, and it's been. I've had my fair share of bad luck this year, and also back home the last month hasn't been great, or this year really. So it's amazing to get this win, and big thanks to everyone that has supported me, and big shout out to my wife, obviously, and my mum as well. We've both had a bit of a rough time recently, so yeah, it's a great day.
Conditions were horrific, not quite as sunny as in Wales. How did you cope with that? How do you cope with the course and the slippery roads?
Yeah, it's just they're not too slippery if you don't go too fast, But the first corner I took quite fast, and Nico was on the radio saying, "Hey, no risks, just steady." And so I took the rest, within myself. And there's a few times where maybe I could have gone a bit faster, but yeah, all that doesn't matter anymore. Just to really get that power out when it mattered. And yeah, I felt good, and I think I paced it really well, and I've done some good TTs this year, so it's nice to. Like I said, I just can't believe it.
Thanks a lot.
Just like you pointed out, Bob, he said he paced it very well. How difficult is it to go out with caution when you're so excited to get out there for the first stage?
Very difficult, and you saw a lot of riders come to grief because of that. They couldn't dial it back like they needed to, and that's just the difference between being relaxed, being calm, and having good direction. His sports manager, if you can imagine, saying you can win, go all in, and then the next corner you're totally, nervous and freaked out. It would have had a very different outcome for Geraint Thomas. So, Team Sky, and when you look at the results, in the top 10 of the riders have come,
and then you look even
rumble.
close to the results, you still look at the margin. 5 seconds that he had on him. Yeah. I mean, that's quite a bit on a shorter time trial. You look all the way down the results sheet, you go all the way to 16th place until you have another 5-cent margin in between the two places. So 5 seconds doesn't sound like much, but over the course of this race today, that's quite a bit. Yeah. And I think he's going to have this for a while. He's a great climber. We were talking about Tony Martin, how long he would have this jersey for. Planche de Belfi.
Could keep it for a while?
He could.
Yeah. You talked about caution. How much does courage come into play on a day like this when you're watching guys in front of you have some pretty violent crashes?
Yeah, the nerves you need to excel at this sport are pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And when you're coming into a corner and it's pouring rain and you know that the strips of paint are 10 times slipperier than the pavement you're on, and you're already barely on your bicycle, to not brake, to not just jump off your bike and walk through those corners is pretty remarkable. And to win, you have to be able to do that.
The guy who won, we've been talking about Geraint Thomas. You heard what he had to say, and there's how he looks on top of the podium. As I mentioned, this is his 8th tour. The first time he's been in that position, his first stage win. And as Christian pointed out, keep an eye on him to maybe hang on to the yellow jersey for a while.
Und hier ist der Etappensieger in Düsseldorf, das Grand Départ, Geraint Thomas, Team Sky.
Voilà, il est heureux évidemment donc d'inscrire son nom au palmarès de cette première étape. Il sera aussi évidemment maillot jaune et maillot vert, on y reviendra un peu plus tard.
And with Geraint, you think of how many times that he's been at the service of others, whether it be Bradley Wiggins, Chris Froome. It's nice to see that Geraint really getting what he surely deserves.
Said he was relaxed before the race and acting like he's been there before, even though it's his first time. Good composure, shaking hands, enjoying the moment. He is your winner of the 14-kilometer time trial here in Stage 1. Team Sky getting it done today, not only at number 1, but also at 3rd and 6th and 8th place. Your first page there, 1 through 5, but I want to turn the attention to the first name we see on the second page, another one from Team Sky, the team leader, Chris Froome. How surprising, how impressive, Bob, to have him there only 12 seconds behind.
This is a shock for all the other GC contenders. 35 seconds faster than Richie Porte, 36 faster than Nairo, up to a minute faster than some of his rivals. Day number 1.
Yeah.
Only 9 miles in. You're already 30 seconds down? Oh, my God. It was a really impressive ride by Chris Froome. And if anybody should have been cautious in the corners, in the wet, it's this guy.
No caution right there as he's pedaling through the first left-hand corner.
Really amazing. Chris Froome. In the pre-race show, I hope everybody that's watching now tuned into that because this is exactly what we said was going to happen. And that's a high bar to set right from the get-go. And that's a clear message to all of his rivals. They better be ready to go the whole 3 weeks. Not just the last week, not just the mountain stages, but every single day of this year's Tour de France.
Yeah, important to point out, and you already mentioned this, but I think it's worth repeating, 35 seconds better than Richie Porte. That was the lead discussion coming in. Is Porte the leader? Should he be considered the favorite? Well, it's only one day, but Chris Froome sending a very clear message to his top rival and former teammate, Richie Porte. Yellow jersey presentation. There is your stage winner. Popular guy here the last 10 to 15 minutes, Geraint Thomas. Same look on his face he had a moment ago. Going to put on the yellow jersey for the first time.
I'm going to predict the headlines for tomorrow, so you don't have to get up early to read the papers. I'm just renting this jersey. I will not be trying to defend it. I will be working for Chris Froome throughout the rest of the Tour de France. I promise you.
Träger des begehrtesten Trikots von LCL bei der Tour de France auf der heutigen ersten Etappe, morgen auf dem Weg nach Lüttich. Geraint Thomas, Team Sky.
Voilà, Geraint Thomas, le petit lion qui représente évidemment donc chaque fois sur le podium protocolaire chaque soir le leader du classement général et d'une manière très sobre mais également élégante et donc d'une grande finesse. Il envoie son bouquet de fleurs à la foule. Voilà, félicité par les personnalités, Stéphane.
Okay, 47 seconds behind Geraint Thomas is where we see Richie Porte, and we talked about 35 seconds behind Chris Froome. So was it possible to be too cautious out there, even though it would be understandable if that's the route you took?
No, I don't think so. Once you have decided to take it easy through the corners, and that's a strategy that you're hoping is going to pay off throughout the rest of the tour compared to the risks. So I don't really blame Richie for taking it easy through the corners. It does put a little bit more pressure on you to go that much faster in the straightaways. But I don't think you can fault him for the pace he took in the corners. That was a safe thing to do, and it's still a long ways to go. But I'm sure he'll be pretty astounded to have lost 35 seconds going flat out on the, straight parts.
Yeah, I think he's still going to be quite surprised to see that he lost the amount of time that he really did. You can't fault him for saying that I'm going to take my time through the corners, I'm not going to take too much risk. But at the same time, you have to think, all right, what about the guys who aren't taking the risk? I mean, okay, it could have paid off or not paid off that Chris Froome fell just like Alejandro Valverde, but he didn't. Right. And he took a lot of time out of him in only 14 kilometers.
How big is the setback for Porte right now? Again, considering it's only stage one.
You just can't give Chris Froome anything. You can't give him 5 seconds.
Pretty significant.
It's huge, especially what we set up this morning, saying like this might be one of the closest Tour de France we've seen in a long time, and then you're losing that much time in the first day.
Right.
Ooh, it's no bueno.
Pre-race favorite, according to a lot of people, and we heard the talk here on our 90-minute pre-race show. Tony Martin, a lot of people out there, he is a German, wanted to see him win. He looked good until the end, and he comes in third place. Strong for most of it, guys, but in the end, what do you think happened?
He just didn't have the finishing kick that Geraint Thomas did. And Geraint, he was going to be the leader for the Sky team during the Giro d'Italia. And Tony did a great ride. And considering the pressure he was under from his team, his own expectations, starting in Germany, maybe his last best chance to lead the Tour de France in Germany. And maybe the pressure got to him a little bit. Maybe he didn't pace himself exactly right. Maybe his tires weren't set up as well as the Sky bikes. And all of that adds up to a few seconds, a few microns here and there. And at the end of 14 Ks, the gap is 8 seconds. So, and that's the difference between winning and losing at this level. But you can make absolutely no mistake.
But really, like we were saying earlier, what you actually said, 12 seconds from the first time check to the finish line is a lot of time that he lost. So it could have come down to pacing. It could come down to kind of risks he take through those last kind of urban corners went through. Who knows? But all we do know is that 5 seconds ahead of everyone was Geraint Thomas, all by his lonesome.
All right, Geraint Thomas, your winner by 5 seconds from Team Sky. Here's the man who came in just behind him, 5 seconds off of Thomas's pace, Stefan Kuhn.
Best young rider for today's stage. That's a great prize for the BMC squad. Mark this name down in future time trials. A real specialist in the discipline, incredibly powerful. And in the years to come, I'm sure he'll be competitive in all the races against the clock.
Stefan Küng, Team BMC.
Can I use my German translation?
I was going to ask how your German is.
Schweizermeister is the Swiss champion.
Swiss champion. There you go. Nice to have Bob around up here.
That's the only 2 words I know in German. So. And beer.
All right, there's Team BMC represented at number 2, taking a backseat to Team Sky. They took 1st, 3rd, 6th, and 8th place. The man at the top of the list, their own Geraint Thomas. There's his reaction. 8 Tour de France's and his first stage victory. That's how it looks and feels. Another guy who's pretty happy with his day, Taylor Phinney, after his debut for the Tour, going to sit down with us right after this. Well, Taylor Phinney may not look that happy right there, but deep down, he's got to be smiling. Back in 2014, nearly a career-ending injury. He is back to riding the Tour for the first time. Not only finished, but finished very well, coming in 12th place and kind enough to sit down with us. Taylor, thank you for your time. If you can go back and remember what you were thinking right there, after everything you went through to get to this point, what did it feel like to finally cross that line?
Man, well, I'll say that nobody looks happy at the end of a 14K time trial. I was just pushing it. I was going for it, and I was trying to do the best time that I could, and I wasn't really thinking so much about the whole journey, but it's been quite a ride, and here I am, first Tour de France, and I'm stoked.
Less than ideal couple of weeks before the Tour de France. Is it safe to say that? After crashing in the Tour of California and having a very tough Tour de Suisse?
It's been a less than ideal whole season. I had a couple setbacks and wasn't able to race the classics. And but you know, just let the body heal. It's good at doing that. And I wanted to make sure that I could come back here and have a good ride. And I made it through Tour de Suisse, and now I'm here. Can't complain. Didn't crash today. Jazzed.
So let's back it up even farther. So less than ideal lead up since Tour of Flanders, more or less. But let's go back all the way to 2014. And that was 14 months or so in between crashing and Colorado, all by your lonesome. But were you ever thinking about this moment that you'd be at the Tour? Or you were just week to week, month to month?
Man, that's hard to say. I definitely watched the Tour de France. I watch you guys. And I imagined that I would get here at some point. I didn't quite have a full plan or anything laid out, but I just figured once I made it back to bike racing that it would kind of take care of itself. And there's some certain steps that you kind of have to build upon to get to this level. And I'm very happy to have made it.
Unfortunately, and you can expect this kind of result with this kind of weather today, and the roads were so slick. Some very unfortunate crashes. We'll take a look at a couple of them. And with these crashes in mind, Taylor, how did you balance the excitement to be at the Tour for the first time you're waiting to go with the caution that you knew you had to have?
Yeah, you know, it's funny because
Yikes.
Slippy.
Yeah.
I've watched the Tour de France so many times at home, on TV, and you see this massive production, and then you get here, and the reality of it is that it's just a bike race, you know? And I've done races in the rain before, and like I said, I had a couple mishaps this year already, so I wasn't quite willing to go... Oh, man, I don't even want to watch these.
This is the most unfortunate crash. Just a horrible scene there. Alejandro Valverde, he was taken away in an ambulance. We don't know how specific the injury is. We do know he is done for this Tour. Really, the worst image of this day right there from Alejandro Valverde.
You know, that happened to a couple guys in front of me. When I came into that corner, there were maybe 8 or 10 people just trying to slow me down because Izaguirre went down after Valverde, and I think he might have gone down because there was a little bit of a scene coming out of that corner. So,
and we think that maybe Izaguirre didn't finish as well in the same corner right behind you, or sort of ahead of you. Excuse me.
He was not moving very much when I passed him. I didn't stop to check.
Right. Well, physically, you put in a pretty big effort. Does that give you confidence for the stages to come?
Yeah, for sure. I felt really good. I didn't realize I was so close to the top guys at the middle checkpoint. I don't go with the radio because I like to be by myself when I do these kinds of efforts. And I felt like I could control it well and I could keep the speed up, and really was able to kind of throttle it on the way back. Not quite at the level of, obviously, of Geraint Thomas, but I'm quietly happy.
I was speaking with your father. He's right behind the lights, if you can see back there.
Yeah.
And we're talking about how it's not really in your DNA to just be along for the ride or just be a cannon fodder within the peloton. Do you have any plans on trying to get out or looking for you, or is truly go back to cliche that we keep on talking about, day by day, night by night, checkpoint? Are you looking forward to any stages?
I mean, honestly, I had today was my main focus, and then now I'll kind of re-click forward and look at the rest of the tour. My main focus, main dream is to make it to Paris. As a team, we plan to race really aggressively over the next couple weeks. We don't have anything to lose. We have everything to gain, and so I will play my role within that team part. And we have a great group of guys, and I think we can have some fun and hopefully surprise win a stage. I keep saying that we're America's team because we have the only 3 Americans.
At least you got a third of the team
in the race. So yeah.
We've been having you watch some of the footage, some of the unfortunate crashes. Let's take a look at your day racing, and a very good day. You came in 12th, and as you watch along with us, as you see certain parts of this stage here, maybe you can talk about some things you were thinking as you were going along. He was quiet and focused. He was focused.
Start to finish, man. I look very green.
Those are bright, yeah. Thought that right away.
We're a bright bunch. I had to throw my visor away in the last couple K because it was getting a little fogged up. I couldn't tell if that was just my consciousness or the visor itself.
Your parents were up here, and your father said he talked to you before, and you were very relaxed. Your mom sat in that seat right there, and she started shaking so much. I had to stop writing, and she was so loud I couldn't hear Phil and Paul. So is that kind of the standard way it goes?
Yeah, I just transfer all my negative energy or my nervous energy to my mom. She really,
as he looks at her,
really absorbs it.
We were just happy that you showed up in the checkpoint because she didn't breathe for like 9.5 minutes. Thank God you showed up there.
Yeah, I mean, I've learned in my 27 years on this planet to take it a little easy when I need to through the corners. I've had my fair share of falls, so.
And your father raced with Bob. Didn't he warn you not to get this close to him? Tour de France, no? Said this was okay?
Man, Bob and I are built from the same, some of the same genetic material, I think.
Could be good. Can be, yeah.
Homies for life.
Not the time trialing part of the DNA strand, however. Taylor is head and shoulders above anything.
Yeah.
Hey, we're all excited for you. Congratulations.
Really stoked, Taylor.
Long road here. 12th place. Nice work today.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Great to see you, buddy.
All right, that's Taylor Phinney finishing his first stage here in the Tour de France. The guy signing the yellow jerseys and the guy wearing the yellow jersey from Team Sky. No surprise. Garrett Thomas, your winner at stage 1. We're back to Düsseldorf right after this.